The next episode of Lookout Sir is episode 200, and because it's a significant milestone, we would love it if you would check out our social media and potentially take it upon yourself to send us some questions or even, some kind of audio samplings of your own experiences with the pod. We're going to post about it on our Instagram, aren't we, Phil?
Yes, we are. I'll be doing it probably the same day this episode comes out. So if you're an eagle-eyed listener and you listen relatively promptly, you can get in on the action.
Absolutely. So if you head over to Instagram, /Lookout Sir, I'm pretty sure that's what our Instagram handle is, isn't it, Phil? It'll be in the description. Worst case scenario.
Could be Lookout Sir 40k. Not entirely sure.
It's probably anyway, it'll be in the description. You know how to search Instagram for things. Head on over there, see what we're posting about, and get involved because, episode 200 is around the corner. It's an exciting milestone, and we will really love and appreciate any kind of support that we could receive from you, our lovely listeners, in order to make it even better. But until then, we're going to leave you with episode 199. Cue the intro. And welcome to episode 199, a troubled episode, it's fair to say. But before we get into the particulars, the worrisome things that have contributed to this, disastrous addition to the Lookout Sir Warhammer podcast, I have, of course, my duty to introduce Phil.
I'm good, thanks. I'm glad I'm not one of the troubles.
No, actually, to be fair, mate, as is often the case, you are the still water, the calm ocean.
Oh, thanks very much. I expect my Lookout Sir Prefect badge in the post.
Well, you are the master of the Lookout Sir branding and all associated IP, so, I would rely on you, unfortunately, to produce that. So
I'll make it for myself.
Create and reward
fine.
yourself.
That's fine. Yeah, I did today see a patch embroidery service online. I was like, I can make some sort of hobby badges, like patches for people to have, or some Lookout Sir ones. That could be interesting.
That's it. That's what we should be getting in on. We should, be rewarding our patrons with sashes, with all sorts of Cub Scout badges or whatever it may be. It'd be a beautiful thing. Anyway, so yes, what's gone wrong in this episode? So first things first, I've been ill. I'm still ill now, but not as ill as I was a few days ago. Good Lord. I'm still sweating a lot, but I'm not coughing every other word, which is a bonus, I suppose.
That is good. Yes. You sadly don't have the Prince Andrew gene then.
Unfortunately not. No, I am, well... I won't say what I was going to say, but
you're sweating away.
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to acknowledge that me and Prince Andrew have nothing in common.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, exactly. Good times.
And what else went wrong?
Anyway, I'm going to leave it in, but I'm very worried that we're leaving it in. Anyway, doesn't matter if that. Blows up in our face, that blows up in our face. Blimey. So I've been ill, still am ill, but not as ill as I have been, and also not to be mean about them specifically, but Games Workshop let down Element Games, and thus Element Games let us down, so we didn't receive our copies of the Astra Militarum Codex until literally yesterday for me. When did you get yours for?
I think mine was yesterday as well. Yeah.
There you go. So, given that the moment where we're recording this intro is Friday the 7th and this comes out on the 8th, hopefully that gives you a sense of context to how that week's gone. So yeah, the plan was we were going to do Astra Militarum. That didn't happen. So, we did a segment, which we are presenting to you, which is us rating the miniatures, from the, Primarch range. I realised, Phil, by the way, as well, we were saying, wouldn't it be good if we could have come up with like an extra character that could have, fell into the Primarch status, and we could have.
Are you going to say Valdor?
I was going to say Valdor. We could have put Valdor in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, he is sort of Primarch level, but he's not technically a Primarch, so it would feel a bit like cheating to have stuck him in.
But as a miniature, at least within the specialist game range, he is of the same DNA.
Yes, that's true. But if we were going to do that, you could potentially stretch to, other faction, like big characters. And maybe that's a good one for another day, a 40k sort of, level, Primarch levels for the Xenos and the other factions.
Maybe so. But anyway, there we go. So we go through... And we talk about every Primarch miniature that is currently available. We don't talk about like the historically available Primarchs, although we did talk about why we should have included them as well. But anyway, that's by the by. So we do that, and then we did an outro. And the plan was we were gonna this week do another section. We had a bunch of options. We won't tell you what they are because we're gonna probably go back to that well at some point in the future. But essentially, all the days where we were going to be available to record, I was very sick and couldn't make it work. So that basically was how the wheels fell off. But don't worry, I've got this out of the way, so episode 200 is going to be great.
Exactly. We're teasing everyone. This is the Empire Strikes Back, where it all gets a bit dark for everyone for a triumphant return with fluffy animals in Return of the Jedi, which will be our 200th episode.
Well, in a way, I think it's quite ominous to suggest that, Empire Strikes Back would be relatable to this episode, given how it is broadly considered to be the best Star Wars movie ever made.
But thematically, it's the low point of the heroes.
That's fair. I understand why you were going with that analogy. That's fine. Well, we hope that episode 200... God, numbers. I really am still not well. We hope that episode 200 will have the quality benchmark in terms of production, filmmaking, and overall kind of significance as Empire Strikes Back. But with the kind of narrative significance of Return of the Jedi, less the Ewoks. Although I was very young and quite enjoyed the Ewoks back in the day. They've always had a warm place in my heart.
Same. I'm Team Wicket all the way, and I would love a somewhat joke list in Star Wars Legions of just all Ewoks. I think that'd be awesome.
But that does exist, doesn't it? You can take Ewoks.
Yes, there's only one main unit and a couple of characters, so you would just be, I guess, spamming as many of those little friendly Ewoks as possible.
We still need to get together and play Legion, really. Someday soon, no doubt. Anyway, so that's going to be episode 199. Flipping heck. The fog. And we've already done a thing before this telling you that we're going to be posting on our social media. So please follow Lookout Sir on Instagram because we're going to be asking for people to submit questions, do that kind of stuff to kind of spruce up the 200th episode. Again, as has already been stated, be really cool. I mean, anything that you want to kind of send over, if there's any voice memos or anything like that, that'd be great as well. But again, we're not expecting much of anything. We understand that, it isn't as significant a thing to most of you as it is to us, but it is pretty significant to us because, we've been doing this now for a long old while, haven't we, Phil? So 200 is a pretty good milestone. A nice line in the sand, stick in the road words to that extent.
No, quite a monumental occasion. I guess 250, that's also a nice big round number. That's quite a big one. Not maybe as big as...
No, now we only care about 1,000.
Oh.
Right, that's it.
500?
Or maybe 500 I reckon is a reasonable milestone from here on in.
We'll probably be dead by then, but,
God, I hope so. But no, anyway, look, there you go. That's going to be 100... That's going to be episode 199. But before we talk about any of that, we have, of course, a 5-star review.
Peter!
Oh, hello,
What are
Dad.
you doing in here, son?
Oh, I'm
What
just...
have I told you about wasting your time with these little plastic figurines?
It's not a waste of time, I like it.
How dare you talk back to me, Peter? It's about time you grew up.
I don't want to grow up. Oh man, maybe there's something on the radio. Yeah, this is nicer.
Peter! Peter!
What's that?
That's right, it's me, the ghost of a award-winning TV and radio presenter, Jeremy Beadle.
Jeremy Beadle?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now let me tell you here, Sonny, my dad was always telling me to grow up, and I never did. And look how successful I was. So ignore him, Peter, and keep playing with that little plastic crack. And while you're at it, listen to the Look Out Sir podcast, which right now is time for the 5-star review.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy.
Who are you talking to with that, son?
Jeremy Beadle.
What? No!
Okay, Phil. This week's 5-star review comes from where, Phil?
Apple Podcasts of the Great Americas.
No, Phil, you were almost there. We've done the Americas the last 2 episodes. Can't you remember anything, you silly old fool?
Not in the slightest.
Well, there you go. That's Alzheimer's for you. Anyway, no, this comes via way of Apple Podcasts of Great Britain. The Great Britons, Phil. We do well, Phil, in the Britons. Feels like forever since I've said that.
I mean, I'd hope so. It's the home turf, so to speak.
Well, exactly. Oh, yes, you'd hope that we do well in the Britons, absolutely. They like us here, Phil, the Britons. Or some do. I imagine some don't, but we won't worry about those. They will have found someone else to listen to, no doubt.
Exactly.
There we are. Anyway, so this comes via traitorlegion, and they have written, "Look out! It's bloomin' awesome. 5 stars." Which, of course, Phil, is what?
It's a prerequisite for a 5-star review. Ooh, imagine that.
Imagine. And if you would like to leave us a 5-star review, you need only do so. Sorry. In the places where you can do so, which include Apple Podcasts of Great Britain or other regions are applicable. Again, as we've been saying a lot lately, please do take the time to tell us where these things are. Just because we are struggling since the demise of Chartable to find a reliable source that pulls together a multitude of reviews. Certainly used to make my life easier, but as is the way of the internet, everything's just getting worse, isn't it, Phil, as time goes on when it comes to technology? And that's what I've kind of learned. Yeah,
that's, what they call it, late-stage capitalism.
Well, that's it. I reckon, Phil, much like the Amish people, we should have just kind of picked a moment in time to stop, but not where the Amish stopped. Although, to be fair, completely on board with their logic. But I reckon if we just kind of stopped around, I don't know, about 2014 kind of technology, 2015 style. I reckon that was pretty on the money, I would say. Maybe 2012.
Oh, fair. I mean, I would quite happily have called it quits at, I think, like 94. I think that's when Dark Forces came out on the PC.
Dark Forces?
That's all you needed. That classic game, end it there. No more.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose. Maybe, kind of early 2000s. The Dreamcast era. That would have been mine, maybe actually thinking about it. Anyway, there we go. So, yes, what else is there, Phil?
There is merch available on our website, and there's also a Patreon if you would like to support us over there. It will help probably go towards Dan's medical or funeral expenses, depending on which one comes first on this illness that's coming for him.
Well, indeed, my poor widow. I'm sure I'll be missed. I wonder if... anyway, I won't say it. I won't incentivize people. Anyway, right. What else is there? Oh, yes, Patreon. Please support us on Patreon. Those that do are super lovely, and you could be amongst them. And maybe at some point we'll do something. Seems unlikely at this point, but we always like to pretend that it's possible. So, if that works for you, why not get involved? Because it does help us out, really, doesn't it, Phil? I mean, it is, basically the lifeblood of the podcast. It keeps us very live.
Yes, exactly. It pays for all our codexes because we're not supported by anyone else. Hence why, as we've already mentioned, there's a delay in getting the Ashman Time codex out. Greatly appreciated for all the people that's helped contribute towards that. Because without that, there wouldn't be a show. Or at least there wouldn't be a show where we're doing reviews.
No. It would be a very expensive exercise to keep that going. But, so that's all of that. Let's talk about this 5-star review. Look out. It's bloomin' awesome. 5 stars, says Traitor Legion. Dan. There we go. Beautiful. Succinct, clear, lovely, podcast 5-star review. I'm not entirely sure whether the implication is that I myself am signing off on the review, as if it's implying that I have reviewed this myself, or if Traitor Legion's name is themselves Dan, which is entirely possible. It was, Phil, one of the most popular names, back in the day, certainly around the time that I was born. So there's a lot of us about, You're never too far away from a Dan, so it's all possible.
That's true. What was the title of it?
What's that? Traitor Legion?
No, the catchline, because he said, "Look out," and then something.
It's bloomin' awesome. Yeah, that was the title.
Okay.
Yeah. Look out! Yeah. It's bloomin' awesome. 5 stars. Dan. That was the entirety of it.
Okay. Yeah. To me, it feels like it's look out. It's bloomin' awesome. Dan. As in, look out, Dan. It's bloomin' awesome.
Yeah, but because he put that in the. No, that's not right, is it?
Maybe it's like look out, sir, but instead of sir, it's Dan.
Yeah, but he's
saying, look out, Dan.
It's bloomin' awesome.
Because someone's coming for you.
But then he would have put Dan after look out.
Maybe.
Doesn't make any sense what you've just said there, Phil. But thank you very much, Traitor Legion. Potentially an individual called Dan. Good on you. Either way. Really appreciate it. The 5-star reviews mean a lot to us, and you mean a lot to us too. So thanks so much. And to elaborate on that, here is Philip.
Phil.
Do you want to do the transitional noise? Because I worry I'm going to choke to death if I try.
I would, I've got a will coming my way, so I will happily let you do it, Dan.
All right, fine. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. Sorry, it's the best I can manage. Good afternoon, morning, or evening, everybody. We're going to be talking about Primarchs, specifically Primarch miniatures, both from the Specialist Games Studios, or Forge World, as they've been known historically, and, of course, our friendly friends over at Citadel. Which do you think will be our favourites? Forge World / Citadel Primarch thingamabib? I wasn't really very happy with that intro, Phil, but we're going to roll with it. How are you, mate? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm raring to go, although looking at the screen, the OCD within me is kicking in and annoying myself that we're one Primarch shy of 2 complete rows.
Well, the way I've edited this to deal with all of the pop-ups that pop up, and also, you'll like this, Phil, because I R&D'd it a bit, you see, because once the bottom line is expended and the whole thing becomes one line, the screen also pushed up. So I did that little bit of, troubleshooting. And now, basically what it results in is currently our viewers can only see one line. So don't worry about it.
So they don't have that problem. It's just me.
It's just you. Me too, Phil. But, I'm not in any way affected by it because I'm a real man.
Fair enough.
Yes, that's what we're going with. Anyway, what's the vibe here, Phil? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Tell us more.
Obviously the new Angron, I want to say Ascended, evolved. The new Angron miniature from the Specialist Game Studio, formerly known as Forge World, potentially still Forge World, actually, from a miniature production point of view. Previewed recently, so we wanted to talk about that miniature. And I was like, why don't we talk about them all? And why don't we try ranking them in some form? And so we're going to do them all, 30k and 40k miniatures across the spectrum. 40k Fulgrim has also snuck onto the list, even though he's not out yet. Obviously, Angron isn't out yet either. Yeah, but so it's interesting that there's, at the same time, there are 2 Primarchs on preview. Imagine that. That in itself is quite a rare thing, that 2 Primarchs are due to come to the hobby space.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time if you like Warhammer, Horus Heresy, 40k fluff. And Lord knows we do. So, yeah, we're going to get into it, have a chat about it, and see what we think. What I've done, Phil, is I've essentially topped and tailed the rows with Angron. So we're going to start with the first Primarch miniature to ever grace our screens, and then end with the latest Primarch miniature, which we assert will be Angron, because obviously...
Yes.
Fulgrim, new Fulgrim has gone on pre-order already, so, it is a done deal.
Oh, so was the original Angron the first one that they produced?
The first ever Primarch miniature ever made.
I didn't
Angry
know that.
Ron. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think it went Angry Ron, Fulgrim, and then I really start to forget after that. I think maybe it was Perturabo. Not Perturabo, I think it was... Ferrus Manus, I think, that came next, because obviously Ferrus and Fulgrim have a famous duel.
Oh, of course, on Istavan, yeah. So,
there you go.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's exciting.
Very good. Good thing I didn't try putting them in Legion order, which is what I was originally going to do if you've just changed it all anyway. So I'm glad I didn't bother with that level of OCD.
Oh, no, that's fair. That's fair. To be honest with you, I'm looking at it currently thinking to myself, the order in which this is going to appear is a little bit sporadic. It would have made sense had we done it in Legion order or release date order, but we're going to do it in the order that it appears here now, which is starting off with the angriest of Rons, the first of the Primarchs, and because he was the first Primarch miniature ever made, I personally have a certain nostalgia and or appreciation for the miniature, but I also think it's terrible. So I'm going to give it a C on the basis that I don't particularly like it, but I quite like elements of it. I like what it represents, but against the whole kind of mixture of, Primarch miniatures that were to come and are now, still coming, I think this original Angron, due if only to its historical significance, gets slightly bumped up to a C. If it wasn't for that, I think I'd be putting it in the D space, but I think, I think that's unreasonable in the grand scheme of things because of what it represents. But tell me, Phil, do you agree?
Not quite, but I think I need to recontextualise my scale, because to me, almost all of them are at least a B and above. Like, I think most of them... Well, no, exactly. So here's the thing. I think they're all fantastic.
Yes,
for the most part. I think maybe one or two that I'll generally be like, don't like. But the majority of them, I think these are... This is the minutiae of greatness. So something that maybe gets a D is, if we were to compare us with our Primaris ranking, these are all on the S tier of that list. And so this is the very top, the creme de la creme, that we're trying to work out. Is he the best model out of all of these? No, that's obvious.
No.
Because but it's a very good one. Obviously they've all got pretty nice thematic bases. When you see them without them, then they start to look a little bit odd. Is this model really interesting? It's got extra people on them, which is always a bonus. I think it's really dynamic, really interesting. The face maybe isn't, super great. And the butcher's nails isn't something I particularly like the visual look of, so I always find them slightly off-putting. So I think C is a fair placement for this guy.
I think so too. I mean, look, you're absolutely right. The dynamic base and all of the miniatures kind of being smashed about as Angron is charging forwards. The way that they've depicted it in the image with the World Eaters themselves being basically bashed aside as Angron is basically...
Get out of my way.
Yeah. It's stepping over a Death Guard. It's a beautiful scene, obviously reminiscent of the events at Istavan, I believe. No, not Istavan. Yeah, it would have been Istavan, wasn't it, where they unleashed the World Eaters upon the kind of loyalist...
The Istavan massacre,
Yeah, and obviously very reminiscent of that particular narrative. And again, the armor details are really lovely. There's a lot of really good elements to it. It's just, unfortunately, it feels like one of the weaker miniatures overall, which is a shame given what it represents. And I always remember back in the day when he came out, he had the most crazy rules. I remember an old podcast called Allies of Convenience did Angry Ron Versus, and it was like basically like a gladiatorial games roll-off thing where he just took on character after character, and because of his like healing mechanics and everything else, he just basically ran through everyone, and then it was hilarious. I think the only person that stopped him weirdly was like Eldred Olfram, because it turns out he doesn't do very well against telepathy back in 7th edition. Who would have thought? But that was old-timey-wimey stuff.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see elements of his armor design and weapons carry through to the Ascended version that we'll see at the very end. So yeah, take note.
We'll call it back. Next along the list is I am Alfarius, the Primarch of the Alpha Legion. I stated my case the first time around, Phil, so please tell me, where does Alfarius fit in the list as far as you're concerned?
Probably a C as well. I think it's good. I think the detail, like the scale armor, is really nice. The spear, gorgeous. I don't know if it necessarily bumps up to a B purely because there's still a lot to come, so I want to leave some breathing space. It's definitely, I would say, better than Angron, though.
I would agree.
Pose isn't necessarily as exciting.
Well, I enjoy the pose because I like the kind of sinister nature of it. It speaks to the kind of cold efficiency and kind of duplicitousness of the character.
I was going to say, I didn't realise until now that he is literally being a backstabber, which is very indicative of the character of him and his legion. So I didn't realise it was quite on the nose, but I was like, oh, he actually is stabbing him in the back. Yeah,
I think it really, kind of speaks to the character. I love the sort of scale mail kind of armor detailing. I think that's really beautiful.
You've got to remember that was all hand sculpted, these ones. Oh, yeah. It's only the very sort of Ascended versions. Actually, I think Khan is probably the only Primarch in his native form that was clearly computer sculpted.
Yeah, potentially. Although I also think maybe Lionel Johnson was not one of those. Yeah, I think it might
possibly because he was quite recent as well, but he doesn't look it. But I mean, that's worth investigating for sure.
For me personally, right, I would say that this is superior enough from Angron to exist in the B line. I genuinely. So for complete context, for a while, this was one of my favourite Primarch miniatures. I probably had it in my top 5. I think looking at it more objectively, I can understand where you're coming from, and I'm happy to kind of put it or leave it in that kind of C space, but I would campaign for it to reside in B momentarily, and we can make an argument for it.
I think that's fair. There's plenty of room in the B to fit more than just one person, obviously, so... I'm happy to leave it there. And if the B ends up being particularly strong, we can bump in the C at the end.
Yeah, that's fair. I appreciate that, my friend. Thank you. All right, fine. Yeah, so no, I love the mini. I think it's cool. The armor detail's really nice. The actual kind of storytelling on the miniature, really interesting. And ultimately, I just think it's, just a really cool kind of composition. I think it's really strong. Next of the miniatures... will be Leman Russ of the Space Wolves. Now, to me, the most redeeming quality of Leman Russ of the Space Wolves, the miniature, is that it has been painted expertly by your friend Phil. What was his name again?
Oh, was it Giuseppe?
It was Giuseppe, absolutely. Painted excellently by dear Giuseppe, and it's real kind of... not coup de grace, but real, kind of je ne sais quoi, I suppose, is that it is built as a dual set between Leman Russ and Magnus. And that, the collective kind of whole, is incredibly strong. I think the two pieces together are exceptional. However, Leman Russ himself... I don't like very much, if anything, about this miniature. I think it's over-designed. I think the face sculpt and the kind of dynamic movement of the hair really kind of makes it look really kind of, awkward and very stiff almost. Like it's almost like a kind of contradiction. They've tried to kind of capture all this movement of ferocity, and they've ended up with just a weird kind of awkward grimace in a very oddly weighted pose. And I just think I understand that it speaks to the kind of ferocity and the kind of single-minded kind of purposefulness of Leman Russ and what he's there to achieve. And as I say, this plus Magnus is very strong, but this in isolation, I don't think it's one of the weakest, but I don't think it's one of the strongest. I think it is probably... I think it's better... In fact, no, I don't think it's better than Angron. I think it's probably low C potential. Well, I won't put it in D because I know what my candidates are for D territory. And Leman Russ is on the tipping point for me. But I mean, yeah, I'd love to get your opinions on it.
Yeah, I think you've put some good points across. I would say it feels like it's the sculpting and the detail and the proportions are better than Angron, everything feels much more crisper. He feels a lot bigger as well, and I don't know if that's because he literally is a bigger model or if Angron was particularly small. But I would say the dynamic pose of Angron, because they're both running, so they're both doing the same thing, Angron pulls it off better. So I would actually say, the posing of the dynamic motion is done better on Angron, which sort of, as you say, I think they're on a par with each other to an extent. So they're both in the C category, I would say. I also remember Leman Russ did come with the two dogs, or the dogs came separately. But I think he sort of takes them in the game. I don't know if they fitted in at all with that dynamic, sort of diorama base with him and Magnus, or if they were just separate entities.
Well, I'm fairly confident they no longer sell the diorama base.
Oh, right, yes. They sell the dogs, but just separately on their own.
Correct, yeah. And they were always, I believe, separate from the diorama. So that I believe the diorama base was just
him and Magnus.
Leman and Magnus.
Yeah.
But yeah, and to be fair, those dog miniatures, those wolf miniatures, are actually really
They're
cool.
really good. Yeah.
They're really good.
Cool.
And they really elevate it, but unfortunately, it's not kind of sold as like a one thing, like you can basically get it as like an upgrade. So it's one of those things where the miniature as you buy it today, yeah, for me it has to be in the Angron conversation. I don't think I think there are, like you said, there are objective points about this miniature that makes it better than Angron, but I don't think it's better than Alfarius. So for me, it is where it is, in my opinion.
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay, we're in alignment.
Okay.
Next, Phil, out of nowhere, we seem to have a clump of Citadel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the Citadel ones.
Oh, randomise them in some order.
Whatever, that'll do. But we do have a Citadel Primarch, Demon Primarch for the first time. And it is, of course, Mortarion. So talk to me about Mortarion, Phil. Where do you think he belongs?
I know a lot of people like this mini, but it's never really done much for me.
Really? I am intrigued.
Yeah, I think his scythe just looks a bit comical with all the bones. It gives me Nagash vibes. I think the actual...
I love Nagash for the sake of reference, just for saying. Nagash is super cool.
I think over the years, Nagash has slowly grown on me, and maybe this is a future video ranking the big AOS minis. But Nagash, I've never particularly liked the over sort of bone details on him. It's the same thing with Yossi Bone Reapers, right? It's that element often I don't like. So yeah, the scythe, a bit too comical and sort of overblown with extra stuff. The armor itself, I would say, is quite cool. But the combo of the hood and the weird gas mask doesn't really work. I mean, I don't mind the bug wings, but they don't, and they do tie in with obviously the sort of flying bugs in the army. But I don't know. I would. I almost want to give it a C. I know you want to put it higher. I would happily put it in the B category, but I don't really think it's an A, maybe.
I mean, here's the thing, right? From my perspective, I agree with you about the scythe. It's got a lot of unnecessary kind of detailing that really diminishes from it, and I don't really understand why it needed a chainsaw element to it, as well as obviously the rib cage and the other kind of nuances of it. It looks like a very impractical weapon.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they've done what they've done with it because, they've got all this incredible new modeling technology that they want to flex, and they want to kind of add layers of detail to things, and they definitely did it. I mean, look, for me, Mortarion is one of the standout best Warhammer 40,000 miniatures. How he stacks up against some of these specialist games miniatures is debatable, and that is obviously what we're going to do. But I sincerely, honestly feel that Mortarion deserves to reside at least in the A tier, given the size, the overall kind of spectacle, but also just the pose is stunning.
The pose is great. The silhouette, I was going to say, is quite iconic in my mind. It's nothing else is like that. But there are elements to it where I'm like, for Death Guard, he's just got so much extra stuff on him, and they are normally very plain and simplistic as an army, as a visual look, and maybe
that's Citadel design philosophy, though, isn't it? It's like,
and they've done it. They've done a good job of hiding a flight stand in like this sort of smoke that's coming down from him, which is good and bad, because one, it's extra detail that is just extra stuff in addition to all the chains and I think it's through balls, something like that, hanging off of him, the sensors. There's just a lot of stuff on it, but at the same time, they've done a great job with what they've got. I don't know. It's one of those things, in terms of the 40k ones, because I've got to almost switch my mind to, this is Games Workshop now. I'm judging it in a slightly different category.
No, you're not. You're judging it against everything else. So, again...
But just for sort of the level of detail, the finesse and scale of the models are just all different from the Forge World ones. So they're not quite as...
But then the Forge World ones aren't built equally either, right? So, I don't think you need to... I don't think you need to kind of be too hard on it, or necessarily too hard on yourself with it. For me, look, here's the thing. Is this model better than Alfarius, Lehman Russ, and Angron? Yes.
It's more impressive, for sure. It's more visually like, oh, wow. But I think when you look at the elements that have made up the model, that's where I would be criticizing and going, oh, it's just got too much detail here and there. Whereas the model overall is definitely more impressive. And in part, that's just because it's a giant guy with wings flying in the air. And obviously, when we get to the other big models with wings, maybe we judge those in a similar or different way.
Well, that's it.
I think I'm coming around slightly to bumping him up, so I think A is fine.
Well, we'll put him there for now. I think that is probably where he will stay, in my opinion. But again, I'm open to the debate. We'll triage after the fact. But right. Okay. Well, that was Mortarion. That was your pick, wasn't it? Well, not your pick, but that was your first. You went first on describing your thoughts on it, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Cool. Well, in which case, my pick, or my next one, is Sanguinius. He's a D. He's terrible.
Any more to add, or was that?
No, awful. Terrible. But there are two massive problems with this miniature. Number one, it is GW greed, because this miniature is at its best when displayed with his display base, but it doesn't come with it anymore.
No, actually,
and you can't buy it.
This is one of the things I just realised, because some of them had default photos not with their display base, so I made sure I pulled the display base ones, because that's what they actually sell them with. This one did have a really amazing base where he was it like fighting a bloodthirster?
He was fighting, I believe it was supposed to be a Commander sculpt, but it could be another Bloodthirster. Yeah, it was him fighting a Khorne Greater Demon.
And then that's just gone, and this is on its very Diddy, gaming base versus the display base. So yeah, I think you're right in that respect. So one, it's missing a big element from it that none of the others are. I think the main criticism this model's always had is its face, and God,
that was going to be my point too. But yes, yeah.
And I can agree with that. It gives me Leman Russ vibes though, because they seem to have very similar faces. Might just be because they're both blonde. And the pose is slightly awkward, although I don't necessarily have a problem with it because I sort of appreciate he's sort of jumping down.
The pose works again when shown in concert with his thematic base. Without it doesn't work. And then also...
It looks like he's riding an invisible horse.
Yeah. And here's the thing, right? Like, 100%, you have to assert that the designer was referencing kind of old biblical kind of imagery. There's that kind of... It's almost like he's posed in that kind of Jesus God painting that's super famous that I can't remember the name of, but it's that one where...
The Michelangelo where it's the fingers, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's almost kind of got that sort of elegance to it. And again, there's lots of really beautiful design details. And again, when you look at it painted the way that GW's painted it and basically photographed, yes, it, when painted in that very particular way, it, can look very painted and very, as in like sort of more canvassy style and very kind of evocative of those ideas. The problem is he just looks raggedy. He looks this is supposed to be one of the most beautiful, but also one of the most deadly examples of the Primarch, right? Like it is basically, he's a pretty big deal. And unfortunately, they don't deliver on the beauty. He's butt ugly. And the pose is awkward. And also you can't buy the thing that makes it look halfway decent. So I think it's terrible. I think it's a really, really terrible shame that probably one of the coolest and most interesting and most kind of important Primarchs in the Heresy is represented with a miniature that looks like Margaret Thatcher falling down the stairs. It's awful.
Do we think because all the Primarchs seem to be getting like an ascended version, do we think we get one of Sanguinius, but he's just ripped in two?
just him hung up on the wall after
and it's a diorama piece. Obviously, you get Horus there, you know, on the battleship. It could work.
I mean, an image of Sanguinius torn to pieces and hung on a wall in bits would be preferable to this.
Because to be honest, so that is based on there was two iconic pieces of artwork, and the fact that they would not even think about replicating that in some form of diorama for collectors, even if that costs like 500 quid, people would lap that up. But here's the thing: I really like elements of this model, and I think it could easily go in or be a C category. But I think, as you say, there are just things that there's like real flaws in this one that diminish it from being a bit better. Yeah. And the scenic base definitely is hindering it, so that's points off straight for that. And as you say, the pose is just a little bit awkward, and then the face just doesn't seem great. So yeah, I think D is a fair spot, although I think it's probably in the upper portion of the D's in comparison to what might be coming.
Maybe. Well, let's talk about Fulgrim, eh? We got regular old normal
the
Fulgrim.
The first of 3 Fulgrims that we've got. He's got the most minis out of everyone.
He does. He's a popular boy.
Yeah.
What's the vibe? So where you putting him?
I would say a low C. I think he's just okay. Like there's the pose is all right. The sword is great. He looks awesome in terms of his face. He's very ornate. The base actually is really underwhelming. I don't think it's really doing much. It's just a lot of stone and some dead bodies. It's not really conveying or adding to the story of the model itself. and he sort of just looks like he's doing a bit of an "I'm out of here" pose. Whoosh. Yeah. So to me, I if you wanted to put it in D, I wouldn't complain, but I think definitely C for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would be tempted to put him in D, but I think, again, he's sort of elevated slightly by the fact that he, again, is a dual piece with Ferrus Manus, which was quite a nice thing when seen together. And, I mean, again, this mini is mostly let down by the face sculpt, yet again, although in this recent image that we've got here, the face doesn't look quite as, like... I don't know what was that painting with it's like a guy screaming and it's like a woman thing. It's
the Scream.
The Scream, yeah. It doesn't quite look as much like that anymore in this particular photo. But the way I remember, basically, looking at this again, I remember it looking worse. Like in my head, I was like, "Oh, this is bad," and I was expecting it to be bad. But now that I'm looking at it again, especially after just looking at Sanguinius. I'm like, in a way, I feel like we've given this guy the best opportunity to get a C, because after just looking at old Sangers, this is...
Well, here's the thing. Sanguinius is more impressive as a model, if that's how we're rating it. I think his pose, while slightly janky, is much more evocative and interesting and dynamic, whereas this is quite weak, and to be honest, is one of the sculpts that feels quite dated now. And I think it was one of those like really early sculpts. So I think though they're probably showing their age a bit more than some of the ones that came a bit down the line in the sort of release schedule. It's still good. Still good though.
Well, I reckon let's leave it in the C's at this point, and let it dwell there. Again, bit dated. Yeah, like fair enough. All right, next we have Corax of the Raven Guard. He's a D, but he's better than Sanguinius for all the same reasons as Sanguinius, except he at least keeps his thematic base. So he gets to be better than Sangers, but he's awful. Look at how terrible that is. My God. No, I don't want to be unnecessarily combative, but it's just not very good.
Is it just the ones that are jumping down we don't like?
Evidently, yes, for me. That pose is horrible. The miniature looks like I'd have to, transport it in some kind of, it looks like it would break in a stiff breeze. It just looks... Well, I just don't like it very much at all. I think it's awful. Well, not awful. It's awful fair. It's bad, is what I would say.
Okay. Well, what was interesting, because when I was looking online, this is the one where I was like, oh, this is the thematic base, but actually this is also the gaming base. Like, there is no base that kind of comes away. Or if it is, it's well hidden, and they didn't, on the web store, show you it, because all the others, they sort of show them separate and together. And I think because of the sort of position of it, you can't really hide a rim anywhere in that sort of top part of the model for it to be sort of cleverly disguised. Yeah, things like the wings, I'm not a huge fan of. The jump pack at the back actually looks really interesting, but the wings kind of kill it for me. I think I agree with you. It's got to go down the bottom.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just, again, it feels harsh, right? Because obviously someone worked really hard on this, and this is an artist that can create things far greater than what I can create. So obviously, my criticism is somewhat kind of unreasonable in some regards.
We're doing that thing that you hate when people judge competitions when they have no skill in that competition.
Well, exactly, yeah. But the thing is we're tier listing. It's a different vibe, and it's just
no one's winning a prize.
Yeah, no one's winning a prize. But or maybe we will send a prize to the winner. Corax again, super cool character. I mean, almost all the Primarchs are cool and interesting in different ways. Corax is super cool, but ultimately, this miniature should have, again, my humble opinion, in a thing that would really help this is if it just had a helmeted head swap. Like, I think that if it had like a beaky helmet type thing, I think you probably could overlook it. But I think that, again, the face is so derpy and so bad. It just everything about it just sort of suffers as a result. But I also think the pose is pretty weak, and not for me.
Fair.
Well, there you go. Phil, what are you going to say for Fulgrim Ascended, or whatever he's called now?
I think it was Ascended, yeah. To me, this is going to have to be an S.
I think completely agree.
It's impressive, both on the sort of the scale and size of it. The wings are huge. The detail is, phenomenal. It's just gorgeous. It sort of has everything you expect from a demonic Fulgrim mini, basically. And I think I even remember when they released it, they were talking about a lot of decisions that they had to make, because in some of the old artwork from, I think it was the Horus Heresy card game, which is where the lion's share of the very original artwork came out for the Heresy. I think it was like he came with like a sort of a generic sort of actual backpack. And then they were like, but then when they tried sculpting it, it's like, well, the backpack doesn't really fit with the wings. So they've sort of done I think they did like a more organic sort of backpack to allude to it being there without being an actual like sort of powered armored backpack. So they did some really nice things with it. Yeah, I just think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's stunning. Like, it's deserving of the S tier. I mean, there are a couple of minis in here that I also think sit alongside it. We'll get to those in a moment. But I think, without playing my hand too soon, I think it's arguably...
you like the best.
I'm torn. It's this and another one for me. But it definitely is one of the best that they have, easily.
Okay.
It's stunning.
Yeah, that's fair.
Next is Ferrus Manus. Ferrus Manus, I think, is a pretty competent sculpt. I like the fact that they have given him lots of kind of Tech Marine-esque kind of nods. He's got a number of different servo arms and different components that are posed really elegantly in this particular miniature. They've obviously kind of contained it in a good way. The face sculpt looks really good. The sort of dynamic nature of the pose, the swing of the hammer.
The silver hands.
The silver hands in the paint scheme is really cool as well. The kind of mechanical detailing in the armor, where it's got the rivets, but also the kind of pistons and other elements. He looks like man and locomotive came together and smashing people with a hammer. And for that,
he also looks like The Rock.
I suppose so. I was getting more of a kind of Batista vibe from him if we were going with wrestlers for comparison.
Well, just more like looking at his face now, I'm getting The Rock vibes.
I don't know. He's got too much hair for The Rock. Maybe he's more of a... who's that lad who is one of the Steiner's kids? What's his name?
My wrestling knowledge is weak, so I wouldn't know.
No, fine. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is he is a B, in my opinion. I think he's very good.
I feel like that's a bit high, but I'm just not into his aesthetic, I think.
Okay.
But I think there's a lot of real, it's a competent sculpt and there's a lot of detail in there. I think personally I would rank it as C, but I don't want to just end up putting everything into the C category. So let's put him in B. Put him in B
for now. Okay, next, Horus Ascended, Phil. Tell me more.
Horus is probably my favourite Primarch. The original sculpt was very good.
Really good.
I think the original was quite iconic, but I think this one it's either got to be an A or maybe even an S. Like, it could squeeze into an S category, I think, because I do think it's a phenomenal sculpt. It's got some real weight and bulk to him. He does feel like he has literally leveled up. And I love his sort of base as well. It's just like covered in skulls, which feels very appropriate.
Strangely, I think the base is the only thing that lets it down. Not lets it down, but it's very cool. But it's very busy and very. But again, it speaks to, you know, him and what he's done. I almost would have preferred him in a kind of bloody, gore-drenched kind of environment as opposed to.
Well, he should have been on the spaceship with Sanguinius as his diorama base.
Absolutely, I think that's the thing. I think ultimately, you know, there's a lot of symbolism in it. It's probably depicting, I don't know this for sure, but it's probably depicting one of his kind of dream sequences as he's seeing the deaths that he's causing or something like that. So I totally get that it's a cool base, but I think it's one of the weaker elements of it. But
you're right. It's sorry to interject. It's basically like a generic pattern because it's all quite samey. It's just bones and some like, you know, it looks like guardsman armor or something. It's, and that's just throughout. So there's no differential to it, which I think is a fair point. Like it's very samey all across.
However, the geezer on top of the mountain of bones is stunning and is, in my opinion, probably one of the best heresy sculpts in a similar vein to Fulgrim Ascended. I think he's S. I think everything that's going on above the bones is so iconic and so beautiful. And to me, the character of Abaddon is by far and away the most iconic character in all of 40k. This is so of that, you know, like this is, to me, even though it's not Abaddon, it's Horus, I think it just kind of, there's nothing bad to say about everything happening above the skull or above the bones. It's phenomenal. So much so that it just has to be an S tier.
Okay, good. I'm glad that that's where it belongs. Because I was like, A's fine, but really I want it to be in an S. Yeah, it'd be interesting because obviously Abaddon isn't a Primarch, so he's not in there. But if he was in here, he could have filled in that 20th spot or whatever number it was, the last spot in the squares for my OCD. Yeah. But it would have been great to like compare it with the Horus sculpts. And see how he would have compared along. Maybe we just do a little, you know, verbal talk at the very end where we think he would have fitted in.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. For me, like, the best depiction of Abaddon I've seen in model form is that wetter thing that they've done. Like, that is gorgeous. So, yeah.
And you haven't got yours yet, though?
No, they're not delivering it till the middle of the year. I had a chat with their customer service about that the other day. So
you're like, where's this model I've paid for?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, come on, guys, like, flipping hell. Anyway, but yeah, soon. Anyway, yeah, stunning mini. Well done, them. I mean, again, this was the thing, right? Like, two absolute stone cold stunners in terms of recent Primarch minis from the Specialist Games or Forge World team for this edition. Really, really cool. And again, I think, how many have they done? They've done 4 new Primarch sculpts, haven't they, for this edition of Horus Heresy? So there's Fulgrim, Horus, Khan, and
Angron.
Big Angron, I think. I don't think I'm missing anyone, am I?
Not I can think of, no, because Dawn came a bit earlier, I think.
Yeah, Dawn came a little bit earlier. Right, next is Corax, not Corax, sorry. Why have I forgotten the name of the Night Haunter? The Night Haunter.
Is it Kurz? What's his name?
Conrad Kurz. Flippin' heck.
That's it.
Yeah. Should have, I'm just relying on my ability to remember these names. Conrad Kurz. Here's the thing with Conrad Kurz. I think the character is absolutely awesome. I think he's one of the most interesting characters when told by particular writers, although I did really struggle with the depiction of the character during the events of the Unremembered Empire, because he basically became the most double hard thing in the world to the point that it was honestly quite absurd. But look, I think the Conrad Kurz mini, to me, is a low B, is what I would say for it. I think it deserves to be higher than Leman Russ, Angron, and Fulgrim, but I don't necessarily think it's better than at the moment Ferrus Manus and or Alfarius. So I would pitch it low B, but I think it is a stunning sculpt, and I think there's a lot of really good things to say about it. The face sculpt, again, is a little bit kind of, gaunt, but that's very kind of indicative of the character. And I think the fact that they haven't shied away from him being covered in lots of gruesome, bloody details is quite incredible. And again, you can't see it in the image that we're showing at the moment, but, that cape of skin is really, really cool. So, yeah, for me, I put him in a low B kind of territory. Where are you feeling for him?
I'd potentially do a high B. Definitely in a B category. It's one of those things where I've never really appreciated the model or given it much consideration. Maybe because I'm just not like a Night Lords player or person. Although I'm loving the sort of vampire detail on his like chest piece, and the pose I really like, that he's sort of like hunting people. It's very like stalker pose of the kind of gothic cathedral that he's on. So the diorama base for me is excellent. The pose really plays into the diorama, but also the general character of who he is. So I think almost elevates it up beyond the other two that we've got in that B category.
No, agreed. No, fair. In which case, let's put him at the top of the Bs.
Or you can stick him in the middle if you want to.
We'll leave him in the middle. I don't think he's necessarily as good as the Alfarius sculpt, but I do think he's better than Ferrus, to be fair, based on what you were saying, actually. Or I'm comfortable to kind of put him there. Next is Magnus the Red, as seen in the what was it? The Magnus. Where did Magnus appear? It was the
Burning of.
No, it wasn't Prospero. That was the events of the Heresy. He returned in the Burning of Fenris or something to do with Fenris. Yeah. Anyway, the first Citadel Primarch miniature to ever release. Obviously, they had done Primarch miniatures via Forge World for Horus Heresy already at this point, but Magnus returning to the game of 40k was very significant. The miniature has loads of different variations, so he's quite different from Mortarion. Mortarion is Mortarion. You build him and he's Mortarion. Magnus, you could build with multiple different faces. He could also... Can
he be topless?
He could also be topless as well, yes, absolutely. He can show off his beautiful pectoral muscles. So there was a few kind of custom sculpting opportunities for him. His stature was, and still is in my opinion, ridiculous. I remember at the time this guy being released was when GW Studio used to still do not interviews, but talk to customers at like Warhammer Fests. And I remember talking to the guy who designed this, and he was basically saying at one point, he was saying at one point we had him small, like Demon Prince size, and then we experimented with him being humongous, like kind of like Stomper size, and then we went, they went, we'll go somewhere in the middle. So yeah, they had like they had different versions of him on display. I don't know if you remember, but it was like.
I'm sure I would have been there, but yeah, the Stomper size one would have been quite impressive. But he's sort of a bit too over the top in his size as he is.
Yes, I agree. I think he should have been slightly smaller in terms of his stature. But again, it was to really kind of drive home, this is a big centerpiece mini.
Well, if you think about it, and actually we have failed. We are missing, I believe, at least 4 miniatures, which is the epic scale versions that very first came out, that technically should have been in this list, but
but they're not current, though, right?
They're not current minis. Well, here's the thing. I think Magnus was very iconic in his original form because he just had like a big eye.
You're not going to say that's a better sculpt than some of this other stuff, are you? Just
no, I mean, who knows? Maybe. Who knows? But I think he was quite iconic in that miniature. But yeah, he's.
There you go.
Okay, for me, this Magnus, I would actually put in the D category. Do I need to? Here's the thing. He was. I've just never liked him as a model. Yeah, it was very obviously an important thing to the game. You could also argue that he represents some of the very worst aspects of the game by bringing Primarchs back. But that's a different topic, and that's not what we're judging this on. Yeah. But I just think the pose isn't great. Some of the head options are terrible. Some are a bit better. And it's just a bit of a mishmash of elements, like the feathers and the hooves, the bits of armor, very like horn heavy. Yeah, and obviously these are all things that he's meant to have, so I can't really begrudge that. But to me, as a Demon Primarch, it's not anywhere near any of the others, so it would have to be at the bottom.
My favourite detail about the Magnus sculpt, the Magnus Red sculpt, is that he's standing on the arm of a Dreadnought kit that you can't buy anymore. That's...
Oh, do you know what? I'd never noticed that that's what it was.
Yeah, he's standing on a old Spudknot arm.
I mean, you say stood on it. He almost looks like he's floating like a millimetre above it because it doesn't seem to connect very well to that base.
No, that's fair. But yes, he comes with an old discontinued miniatures arm, which is always a nice little thing. I mean, it could be technically a Contemptor arm, actually, looking at it, but either way, it's look, for me, I'd probably I'm gonna put him in the high D territory. I agree with you. It's hard to argue that he deserves to go any higher than that. So yeah.
Well, I was going to say if it's got a wing, it's in the D category. But Fulgrim and Mortarion have escaped that so far. So
they have.
It's not that we're just giving Ds to the winged people. We're not wingedists.
No, not at all. Next is Horus. Horus of old on the stairs. He's an A, and he's probably better than Mortarion. Stunning sculpt. Really hasn't aged poorly at all. Really beautiful. Obviously superseded by the new and superior Horus Ascended, but really iconic, really beautiful sculpt that just, ultimately just delivered on the promise of bringing these characters to life on the tabletop. I love it. I think it's really, really good. And I don't really think I can say much more about it. What do you reckon, mate?
I was going to put it in the A as well. I think you've sort of said it all. His base I really love as well, with like the sort of eagle Aquila at the very end and the staircase. He's got a very like statesman-like pose, which I think is very fitting for the era of Horus that he's trying to display. I would have almost said it deserved to be in S, but I sort of feel like the newer sculpts have sort of, and you said the Ascended version, has sort of superseded it. I think this pose has maybe got a better silhouette than the Ascended one, but the newer sculpt does look better, I would say. But I love this one, and I would still... Yeah, because in my heart of heart, if I was to do Heresy as a Legion, it would be Sons of Horus, and I would love an excuse to pick up this mini.
There you go. Yeah, no, I think it's great. He's really good. Next is Perturabo. What do you reckon, mate?
It's a good model. I really like. Firstly, he's clearly inspired by Dynamo from Running Man.
Like 100% Dynamo from Running Man.
He's got that chunky boy vibes to him, but like he's got an amazing diorama base, which is I think a Sarastas Knight. Yeah,
stunning,
phenomenal. Like his armor is just so huge and bedecked in detail. Like his kind of custom wrist-mounted weapons look phenomenal. I would put this A. I sort of feel like it could be even higher because it is one of my favourite ones, I think, out of the generic Primarchs, if that's what we're going to call them. But yeah, I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this. I love even like the little details, like where you can see all the bullet chambers or the casings rattling down the
overnight.
The night. The idea that he's up there, you know, spraying away with his insane armament is just, I mean, the base is stunning. The miniature is stunning. The fact that, it looks like Dynamo from Running Man adds to the overall kind of appeal
here's
of
the
it.
thing. He does look a little bit silly, but it's like, but then Dynamo looked silly as well. So it's like, I'm buying into it, basically.
At least it wasn't Dynamo walking around backstage after being spared, right? When he had when he wasn't wearing any trousers.
Yes,
that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Just him in his pants running around.
I mean, maybe that's a conversion waiting to happen.
That's it. Or maybe someone needs him in his little car.
Yeah, no, true. Now, technically, the next one should be an S tier, just so we can complete all the rows like we're playing Tetris.
Mate, honestly, so I completely accept that Fulgrim and Horus are two of the best, and by far the best, sculpts within this selection. To me, for the longest time, Magnus the Red, was in my top two. Like, this guy, to me, is, well, probably top three, I would say. He is... To me, I love it. And again, another one of the Giuseppe paint jobs, and like the way that he has, I mean, again, when you see this miniature in person, the atmospheric kind of light source stuff that he's done with it, all the kind of, purple sort of, lights emitting, and the way that it interacts with the armor is stunning. But just the miniature itself, the way that it's taking the base and using the elements and kind of incorporating those magical bits to it, and just the way the armor's designed, I love him. I genuinely, I would put. No, I can't put him in S, but I could. I could do. I mean, I think to me, he's stunning. Like, I think he's a very high A. I think he's better than the old Horus sculpt, personally.
I don't think he's as iconic, but I think objectively he probably is a better sculpt. And I'm not like a huge Magnus fan. I mean, I liked him in the stories and stuff, but the basing is good. The sort of the Witchfire flames coming out from the base is really impressive. His stature and pose is actually really good, and all the details on him is quite phenomenal. It's like, it's not for me, but I can objectively appreciate it and go, he's a handsome man. Like, so I think the A category probably is where he deserves to be, because he is, like a really good mini.
No, I'm glad you are comfortable agreeing with that. I think, honestly, I think he's high A for me. I'll put him behind Horus just because of the iconic nature of Horus, but I think, I'm a big fan of the Magnus sculpt. So the next one is Mortarion. Again, it's definitely one of the weaker ones. Again, I actually think the artist who painted this has done a great job of kind of bringing to life the sort of drab, understated, really kind of pathetic elements of the character, as sad as it is, because, there's no greater tragedy than what, befell Mortarion. Mortarion is a really tragic story within the heresy, but nonetheless, I think this sculpt does a really good job of conveying that. And in a way, I think in a lot of ways, this is a really, really good Mortarion sculpt. But in being a good Mortarion sculpt, it just doesn't quite capture your imagination in the same way as others. So in a way, they've done an amazing job of portraying the character, but the consequence of that is he's pretty underwhelming. Which is weird.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think, again, he falls into that early heresy sculpting category, because there's basically 3 time periods, I would say. Sort of early original heresy, which were like the very first lot. Then there was like the later ones where clearly the sculpting improved, or the technology in how they were sculpting them got better. And then there's the much more modern era, sort of second ed style, which is all like computer generated, and it got again another level up from there. The monotone paint scheme, very fitting. I think the way he sort of posed holding his scythe and he's sort of aiming downwards just doesn't really give him an imposing figure. But maybe, as you say, that's sort of the point. But I think it just means he's a bit underwhelming. So I think, as you say, a low C, high D area is probably where he deserves to be. But I don't hate him. So, you know, I don't necessarily hate the stuff in D. Maybe Magnus, but yeah, I think Mortarion's better than Magnus for sure.
I don't hate any of it, but I just don't like I wouldn't like. There is no world unless I was like the most diehard Blood Angels player, and I desperately needed to run Sanguinius in my list. I'd still go online and buy a third party sculpt of him. I'm just very disappointed by the quality of those particular miniatures, but I don't hate them. I mean, that would be insane to hate them, but yeah. Although I suppose if there was a hate-worthy character, although he was never quite as bad as Erebus, his chaplain pal, we have good old
Lorgar.
why is it Lorgar? Thank you. God, his name just went. I was like, but yeah, Lorgar. He's pretty underwhelming. He's a D, right? Like, I mean, there's nothing particularly great about him. His base is really underwhelming. His pose is really underwhelming. It's the most unimaginative, unimpressive Primarch sculpt going. In a way, he actually might be one of the worst Primarch sculpts because he's not even got the sort of saving graces of some of the sort of sanguineous elements. He's just super dull. And in a way, that's kind of indicative of his character. But it's just a real shame because for such an important character within the Heresy, it just seems really underwhelming. And there's nothing about this miniature that I particularly like other than it's got a cool mace. That's about it.
I don't know what you're on, Dan. This is the first time I completely disagree with you.
Okay.
I think I really like his base. It's very simple, understated. It's like little steps up, but it's like skulls and candles. His mace.
Another candle. That's fair. That's
phenomenal. I think his pose is really strong. I think it's a sort of a bit like the first Horus. It's just like he's just being imposing. He's at the top, looking down at his subjects or, you know, people he's been beating up. But I think the armor details, like, phenomenal. Like, the greaves on his legs, like, it's got all this, like, inscribed runes all across the armor. The face, I think, is actually really strong. He's got a very cool backpack. But then I just like that, is it Mark 3 or 4? I always get those two mixed up. I'm going to say 4. I'm guessing 4.
Well, I guess he's not wearing any particular mark, as he's got some custom jobber going on there, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's based loosely on one of the
it looks very Mark
marks.
3 in terms of its...
maybe it's 3. In terms of the vents is how I'm getting at.
Those are Mark 3 vents, yeah.
Yeah, I would put this up in low A, high Bs, personally. I really like it. I think it's good.
Wow. I genuinely think this could be one of the worst ones.
No, not a chance. I mean...
Okay, well, we'll put him in...
Should we compromise and be C?
You're pitching for it to be an A, and I'm pitching it for it being potentially one of the worst. We'll put it high C for your... there we go. That's where we're...
I think it's good. It's like, it isn't like... I think it's got a good silhouette, but I don't think it's like... It hasn't got much wow factor. It's very understated, but like... in a good way, I think.
Okay. Well, intriguingly, we're going to have a similar debate, I suppose, because next is Bobby G, the Forge World sculpt. I mean, again, like, obviously there's a lot of interesting storytelling in there, and there's a lot of kind of nods to his kind of Roman Empire-esque...
statesman.
Statesman, etc. So it does really kind of speak well to the character, but yet again, it just seems like a very... sort of static and very kind of uninteresting pose, and again, like, obviously the paint job is really phenomenal. The way the blue, kind of contrasts against the marble is really nice. But yeah, just the miniature itself just isn't really doing much for me, and it just sort of underwhelms me the way it is. So yeah, like, for me, this is quite low down. But I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Unlike Logar, this guy deserves to be in the bottom of the barrel. I don't like him. He's. I've always sort of thought he was better than the 40k one, but looking at it now, like, the banners I like, I remember picking those up for a conversion project because someone didn't want them. He feels very top heavy, like his torso and arms and shoulders feel really huge, but his legs look really small. And I don't know if it's just for angle. And then obviously he's got his sword out, but it's a gladius, which is very, it's a Roman sword, so it would be short. But it just sort of doesn't feel very impressive for having your sword drawn out. He would almost be better off it just being a hand and like pointing or going, yeah. So, and I don't think the face is that great, but I think the face is better than the 40k one. So, but I would put this at a D personally.
Now, as a D, better or worse than Sanger's?
Well, I would. I don't know, to be honest. I think there's elements of Sanguinius that I really like. Personally, I think Magnus would be at the bottom for me.
There you go. Okay.
I would have Sanguinius as the first one, top spot. I think he's still the best of the worst.
Best of the worst. Okay, fair.
Where would you rate Guilliman in that spot, or are you quite happy with where he is?
I think he's fair. I think he's where he belongs.
Okay.
Next is the Citadel Fulgrim Sculpt. Again, obviously a great deal more practical than your Forge World equivalent. This miniature is much more compact, much more user-friendly as a playing piece, but it obviously isn't as visually interesting as the Forge World variant or the Specialist Games variant. Again, the weird skin pullback detail to form the circular shape with the Slanesh icon feels like a relatively unnecessary detail. The wingspan is pretty underwhelming. But, I imagine when looking at it in 3D, it will look quite dynamic and quite nice. It's hard to say that it probably deserves to go into the D area, but it definitely doesn't. The problem is what Forge World has already done is so good. This thing just isn't.
Well,
is it as bad as Magnus? No. Is it as good as Mortarion? No. And that's by the Citadel scale. I kind of feel like he probably sits in the C's.
Oh, here's the thing. It would be funny to put him in the D's and be like, oh, he's a trash piece in comparison to the Forge World one, but that would be very unjust, I think. Personally, I think despite he's got lots of flaws in comparison to the Forge World one, there's still a lot going for it. I think the sort of compact nature from a gaming piece, I think is really good. He's got a great silhouette and a great pose. I think sort of the face and the armor. Well, yeah, I mean, some of the faces are a bit bad. This one is fine. It's good. It's all right. The pose of the weapons, I think, is good. Some of the sausage-like nature of the snake body, I don't like, but the coloring and the texture for what it is fine. But the coloring is really gorgeous, I think, on the mini. I would quite happily put this in a B category because I think it will look pretty good once we see it in person. And I think it's still got a lot of strong elements to it despite not living up to the Forge World one. But, you just can't, basically.
No, I agree. I think you're right. And I think maybe we've been unfair to it in the past. But I think B is where it belongs. We can finesse where in B it sits. But yeah. Oh, sorry. Someone was calling me there out of the blue.
How dare they?
I know, how dare they? Right. No, go away. Right. Next on the list is another Citadel miniature in the form of Bobby G, yet again. So we have Marnius Calgar, not Marnius Calgar, sorry, dear oh dear, Roberto Gilliman.
I mean, you might as well be Marnius Calgar, right?
Might as well be.
Took his title.
Here's the thing. This miniature with the heads with the helmet, to me, has kind of grown on me over the years. I liked it out of the gate. I think it's very statically posed, although I like some of the details on its base, or his base. I think overall, I feel as if the mini deserves to sit in that kind of sea space. I don't think it's realistic that it could go any higher than that, but I don't think it's as bad as some of the stuff that's in D at the minute. I certainly think it's better than the Forge World Specialist Games version of the character. So
I agree with you. C's a good solid pick for it. I think for what it stands for as like the first loyalist Primarch for 40k, that is quite iconic. I think the pose is, I don't know, I think the mini's iconic, but I don't think the mini's good, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I think it's overly ornate. The scenic base is very weak, I think, especially in comparison to the Forge World ones, but I think that's always the way. Like, the Games Workshop ones tend not to have any basing detail to them at all, and it's sort of only in the last couple of years that we start seeing characters with really interesting bases on the whole. There's elements to it that's cool. Like, the sword's fine, even though it's jumbo-sized. His gauntlet, I think, is really cool, but he's just sort of so overly detailed. His armor looks quite chaotic, which I think is cool. And the bare head is terrible, and would be worse than the Heresy version. But I think in overall retrospect and what it's representing, he's a much more go-get-em action fighter version of him, as opposed to the more statesman version of Heresy. So I think, it does end up being better.
Yeah. Next is Rogel Dawn, dressed as Kent Brockman from The Simpsons. Here's the thing. I can't remember the name of the guy who did it, but he did a very simple kit bash where he took the Rogel Dawn mini and then put the head from Bobby G onto him, so the helmeted head. And that was like 10 out of 10, stunning. This, as a mini, yet again, it's weird because, again, the hair, the design of the head, like I say, he looks like Kent Brockman, the newscaster from The Simpsons.
Oh, right, yeah, I get it now. I see it now,
yeah. But yeah, like, genuinely, the pose, the silhouette, everything, it's a very strong miniature. I think this is an A tier. I think the armor's really cool. I think basically this is another example of that. The face sculpt kind of lets it down, but otherwise it's really strong. I don't think it's in the same kind of territory as like an S tier thing. I would be comfortable with it being in a high B, but I think it deserves to be in an A. Although actually, maybe it's a high B. Maybe it's high B, looking at what's left to come.
I would have quite comfortably put it in the A. It's definitely a high B. It's a similar pose to Lorgar, but I think more impressive. And in part just because of the scale of the base that he's on, right? It's really huge, really interesting, like sort of steps with some dead bodies on. But I love that the kind of cape is flapping in the wind and he's sort of stoically posed, which is very sort of feels in character to who he is and what he represents as like the defender of the Imperium. So I think it's a really solid sculpt. So yeah, A or B for me.
We'll put him in the A, and we'll debate after.
Fair.
Next is Vulcan. Where do you want Vulcan to go?
I've always been a bit underwhelmed by him, and it's probably like definitely a C to potentially even like a high D, because I just think, I don't know. I mean, I think he, looking at it, because I haven't really spent much time looking at him, a very competent and good sculpt, but just isn't doing anything for me. And it's sort of just like the pose looks really interesting. Looks like he's about to strike down something, but then there's just some dead bodies on the base, so it doesn't really match up unless it is one of those diorama bases again, maybe.
Nah, he's not in a...
I don't know. What would you rank him as? Where would
personally,
you put him?
I think as a competent sculpt and a miniature, I think he's one of the better Primarch miniatures, certainly from the early era. I would say, basically, I would put him in the Bs, personally, because I think, again, he came out alongside Angron, Fulgrim.
That real sort of early...
Yeah, he was like, I think the 4th or maybe 5th Primarch miniature to come out, and I think he was a notable step forwards. I think when you see this thing in 3D, it's really stunning, and I'm a real fan of this mini. I think it works on a lot of levels. I think the weighting of it is really good. Like, he's very sort of sturdily planted in the ground. The way he's wielding the hammer feels very, kind of dynamic, and the way that he's kind of lining up the shot, I suppose.
Yeah, the pose is really good from that respect.
That dragon scale cloak is really cool as well in terms of the details. So, for me, I think realistically he has to sit in the Bs.
Okay.
But I think that's where I would put him.
That's fair enough. I think he's just one of those ones that I've sort of overlooked and not really given much attention to. I think his colour scheme, and this is obviously the painting, just feels very drab, because it's sort of monotone. It's just like yellows and browns and greens sort of all blend together. Yeah, so there's no real contrast in that being picked out in the paint scheme, at least.
No, but again, I suppose that was, again, when they were still doing much more of a kind of, that more kind of, whatever it's called, sort of historic style paint systems that they used back in the olden days of Forge World. They paint to a more kind of Citadel scheme now, slightly more elaborate. Next is Citadel's Angry Rom. Where are we putting that?
Ooh, I think it's got some really good elements to it. It always just feels a bit fat and chunky, like especially in the wings. I sort of like it though. I love it.
I genuinely think this is. I think this has to at least be a high B.
I was going to say B for me is where I'd probably put it, and I think it's one of those ones that would grow on me. There's, I don't think the wings are necessarily great in particular, but I think that's because normally you expect wings to be very like live and sort of highly detailed and thin, whereas these are very strong and muscular and like huge and they're a bit overblown, but that is much more suitable for him. So I think B's is a good place for him.
No, I think so too. I think he just is he's just a very, very solid sculpt. And again, I've seen a lot of these on the tabletop. There were a lot of people running at that Angron sculpt at Beachhead a couple of weekends back. And very popular in the game at the moment, and also some very, very high quality paint jobs being shown off for it as well. So I think it's a mini with a lot of upside and definitely really cool. The next one, Khan, I think is going to be an easy A. I actually think there's a chance you could put him in S. I think he's that good.
Ooh,
but I think I'd probably put him in A.
Either or. I think for a sort of generic Primarch, and I mean in a sort of non-ascended way, I think he's arguably one of the best. He's obviously the most recent one for the 30k Primarch. He's also on what I believe is the old Krieg Forge World. I say Krieg, the Forge World trench system as part of the base. I recognise the placement and sort of style of which is a nice little nod to that old kit. I think the armor's phenomenal. The
Incredible.
face and head sculpt is really good. I think it did come in for some criticism when it first came out.
Really?
I think it's because clearly he's meant to be like Mongolian, right? But he just looks like a white guy. I think in terms of the sculpt, it didn't accurately represent the ethnicity that he should be. And I can kind of see that, but it's still a cool mini though. And I think the sculpt is very phenomenal. Like the cloak detail, the pose is very strong, the dynamic sort of diorama elements of the base. So yeah, I think I would either do, very high A or it could be low S, and only purely because I would put it as like the best of the sort of regular Primarchs.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is the best of the regular Primarchs. Again, I really like the Magnus sculpt, but I can understand why people aren't as enamored with it. I think this guy's pretty phenomenal, and is definitely in the conversation. I'll leave him in the high A territory just for now, but I think if we desperately feel like there needs to be another guy in the S, I think he could be it. Next is Lionel Johnson by Forge World. I love this sculpt. I think it is stunning. I fell in love with it the minute I saw it. I genuinely think the combination of the dynamic base combined with the armor detailing, the fact that this was a Forge World sculpt that actually had variety, so you had either a helmeted or kind of fleshy face sculpt. Bare head, thank you. And he even had different weapon options, so he can have either his big, kind of executioner chainsword or his power sword. So again, for me, this is really, really cool. Again, I have to concede that it isn't quite as cool as the Khan Mini, objectively, but he is my favourite. He is my favourite, but I don't think he stacks up quite against Khan. I think the thing that gives him the boost is the themed base. But yeah, and I suppose while we're on the topic of Lionel Johnson, I'm always really torn between this and the Citadel one in terms of which one I think is better.
Right, yeah.
I think on balance, I think this is superior to the Citadel sculpt. However, the Citadel sculpt goes from essentially, depending on what head you put on it, in my opinion, being pretty cool to being pretty ridiculous. I really don't like the old man aesthetic of Lionel Johnson as depicted in the Citadel version. I understand he got to look like what's his face Lannister, Tyrion Lannister, etc., and people like that, but yeah, it seemed a bit odd that he'd become an old man, but whatever, fluff and things. Again, the Watchers are really cool. There's lots of cool elements. I'm really torn. Tell me what you reckon, Phil. You're going to have a more objective opinion.
Yeah, I think they both have good things going for them for different things. So obviously the Heresy one's got the cool dynamic base. It's got an interesting pose, but I don't think that it's conveying the motion of him swinging his sword or chainsword particularly well.
I agree with that. It feels quite static.
Yeah, it feels really static. And it's good that it's got variations between like the heads and the weapons. The backpack feels weirdly small, at least from the angle that it's shot at in this photo. But the armor detail is really incredible. And it's sort of that aspect is much better on this model than the 40k one. But I think the striding pose of the 40k one is quite iconic and is like a really good silhouette. The armor detail doesn't look quite as interesting. It's much more like some of the Sword Brethren of the Black Templars, where it's like much more sort of plainer armor. But I think overall he's got some really cool like elements to his 40k armor. The Watchers, I would say, it's a cool element in them, but they just look disproportionately weird and wrong. Like their bottom half is like too small. So I would argue that the 40k one's a better miniature, though. I
kind of have to agree. The more I look at it, I'm like, it's pretty stunning.
I like the bearhead option. I really the bearded old man look. I quite like to him. Where would I put them both in A's? Maybe I would. Yeah, probably say the 40k one is an A, and then the 30k one is maybe a B. But then I know you like it, so they're both good minis. But I don't think it's necessarily got the overall composition of the Heresy one just isn't quite there to sort of blow me away in an A way. It's not got a game on there.
If Lionel Johnson's going B, Rogal Dawn's coming with him. Is my opinion.
Where was he before?
He was in A.
I think he still deserves to be. I think he's.
You think Rogal Dawn is a better sculpt than Lionel Johnson?
For the 30, 100%.
Really?
Yeah. But I think it's just got a stronger pose. It's much more statesmanly like.
Fair.
But I think it's quite that. Yeah, to me is better than. I know you're a Dark Angels player, so you're biased.
Yeah. No, but that is true, but it's also just I really like the sculpture. And again, maybe
it is
that
good.
is because of
it is good. I don't know. It's one of those. It's all subjective, Dan. So
no, of course it is. But no, we have to reach a consensus, and the consensus is Lionel Johnson is the best of the bees. That's what I've gone with.
Fair. That's fair.
I think that's fair. So we started with Angron. We're going to end with Angron. We now have Ascended Angron. You can go first, Phil.
So I really like this model. It's hard to tell the scale of him because he looks like he could be huge.
He definitely is huge.
The wings are really big. I like that he's like the slim fit version of the 40k one. He's still much more humanoid. I like his sort of mad legs spread pose. His weapons look disgustingly terrifying in a really good way. And I was thinking about it recently. He looks genuinely like he's a hand sculpted Primarch, like some of the good older miniatures. He doesn't have that kind of computer sculpted look that some of them do have, and that's probably not true at all. It just might be the paint scheme is conveying that more sort of old style Heresy look to him. But just like the level of the detail on like the skulls and the face and the armor is just incredible. Would I put this in an S tier? Definitely an A, easily. Potentially yes. I think it's really good. I know you don't think it's an S or even close. But let me hear your thoughts.
Here's the thing, right? Again, as always, when you see these things in 3D, they will often surprise you because a lot of the time these things are let down by the GW photography. I agree with you that the armor detailing is really cool. The skulls and armor elements are interesting. My concern with this miniature and the thing that I don't understand is the slender physique and gangly limbs. It doesn't look like what I assert a Bloodthirster or Demon Primarch of Khorne would look like. Again, noting that the kind of visual aesthetic, the imagery of Khornate demons has always been incredibly jacked, massive, kind of muscular characters. If you think back to the original Forge World, massive Greater Demon of Khorne mini, it was huge, hulking beefcake of a miniature with ridiculous wings and a huge whip and like absolutely ridiculous. Like, it had the Hulk Hogan kind of, 24-inch pythons or all that kind of stuff. It was it's kind of been the visual language that has been established with me around what Khorne is and what it looks like.
Yeah.
I find this miniature looks very effeminate. I think it looks very. I think the face and also the general kind of way that they presented the nails with that kind of longer flowing kind of look. It sort of just skews a little bit more feminine in terms of the design, which isn't innately bad, but it feels odd.
Yes,
it feels odd.
Yeah, I agree. The face is a little bit odd, but it's almost like that's the smallest detail of the model, even though you could argue it's the most important. Also, I think the legs and the pose of the legs looks like he's in heels. It really reminds me of the John Blanche artwork that then became the first sort of New Sisters model. Was it the Canoness? The pose of like the leg is really far out in the heeled boot is very reminiscent to what this is conveying. So I can see it's got some odd elements to it, but I quite like it as a sort of, it's still more humanoid, and because it's so live and skinny, it's kind of almost conveying more about speed than necessarily pure strength. But also,
but that's not Angron.
No, but what I like about it is it's sort of like an evolution between the original model and the 40k one. And it feels like this guy is going to grow into the 40k Angron, but he's not there yet. Whereas weirdly, I sort of feel like with Fulgrim, it's the 40k one is probably more the in-between one. At least in terms of size, maybe, and it would be great to see a comparison next to them. But it feels more demonic, yes, but just feels like a lesser, a lesser model in terms of his progress and journey. Whereas it feels like the heresy demon Primarch version is so much more like the finished final form of Fulgrim.
Yeah. I mean, again, it would make sense as time goes on that Fulgrim becomes less decadent and more hideous, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, look, this is the thing. I don't mind the wingspan and the overall design. I like the idea that it sort of almost looks that he's kind of like landed. This is sort of a moment where he's kind of planted down. As I say, I don't like his weapon design very much.
Really?
Yeah, because again, it looks really feeble. It looks like he's brought, like, you know, a sort of a relatively underwhelming knife and a weirdly kind of, the axe just doesn't have any of the heft and bulk that I would expect.
Again, I feel like they don't need it because they're like these weird demon weapons, right? They're almost like primeval, like raw. I've just found this in the ground somewhere, and it's a pure manifestation of evil. Whereas the 40k ones is like, oh, it's a chain axe that someone's made. Whereas this feels much more closer to like fantasy magic than anything else.
But you have to respect the fantasy and the ideology or the iconography, I suppose, around the character, but also the god of Khorne. And the thing is this is a real departure. It's very odd to think that the same team that produced Kabanda, which is a ridiculous hulking brute of a greater demon, also then gave us this. And the thing is to me, this doesn't look innately cornate. It doesn't look... this is the thing. To me, it has more in common with some of the old-style, janky Demon Prince minis from the 90s. Like, it just doesn't... It just doesn't do anything for me. I'm trying to be nice about it. I think it's really not... it just doesn't look like Angron to me. I think Angron was very well realised by the Citadel team. I think this is just a devolution. I just think it looks weird. There's a bit in the Siege of Terror where Kabanda appears, and he talks about, or the narrator is talking about, how when Commander first manifests from the warp, he's in this fragile state because he's basically reforming and reknitting his kind of physical, corporeal form. And the idea is that in that early instance of him, manifesting in reality, he struggles because he feels heavy, but yet he isn't bulky and his muscles haven't fully formed yet and all the rest of it. That feels like this, if this was described as this is after, he's reappeared, he's rematerialized, the idea being that this is him before he juices up, fine. But again, it feels like a very odd design decision to showcase him in a more gaunt and very kind of feeble state. But again, maybe that's what they were going for and that could be justified. But if that wasn't what they were going for, I don't understand why they've gone for a kind of old hag face. He looks like one of the kind of evil witches from a Disney movie. I can't get over the face sculpt. I think it's bad. And I mean,
the original one looks a bit like an old hag too, to be fair. Although weirdly, there's not
the original
many.
One being which one's the original
heresy version, of him.
Oh, what? Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the heresy version of him. Yeah, maybe.
What's interesting is there's not many design cues and elements from the armor and his weapons from that original sculpt that's kind of come over to this new one.
Well, it's the same. It's the same base principle. I mean, in so much as he's got the slimmer leg elements and so on. But yeah, obviously it's become way more baroque and way more perverse, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's obviously So. Yeah, there are definitely some elements, but it's all much more chaos, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think
anyway, where we putting him, Phil? Where we putting him?
So where's the 40k Angron? Where's he? He's B.
Is it B?
Should we put him in C? Because where would you put him? Would you put him in a D category?
I think he is a mid to low C. Objectively, I don't think it's right to put him in the D category just because of the size and spectacle of the mini. The basing detail does look nice. The wings are actually quite impressive for what they are.
Well, here's the thing. I think that the wings and the pose works better in the new Ascended version than it does in the 40k one, where I said the wings are sort of too chunky and thick. And while the body's got the bulk and the weapons are sort of much more kind of classic 40k sort of grounded or even heresy style weapons, I love the sort of more raw chaotic nature of the Ascended one. But personally, I think it's a better sculpt and it's got an amazing silhouette, I think. But I'm happy for us to compromise and put it a bit lower.
That's fair. Now, again, it's all about the compromise. But I think, for me, my initial response to this miniature was, ugh. It was like, oh, God, that's horrible. And then I've warmed to it over time. But, I still just can't get over the face sculpt. It just looks like, that's the old hag look is just, it's hard to unsee.
Yeah, I guess also what's difficult with it is they only gave you a couple of photos of it. They haven't shown you a 360 of it or given you many photos of it from different angles. So it's still quite difficult to judge from the sort of relatively low quality photos we've had of it so far. So it will be interesting to see, where it is. Sort of in the end,
agreed.
Once these have come out, and same with the Fulgrim one as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. I'm pretty happy with that list as is. To be fair, I don't really think there's much necessity to debate it, but we will. So, S, I think we're both pretty much agreed with. Is there any room in your heart to move anything from A into S?
I think
maybe a case for something.
I think Khan could easily go up to S out of all of them. I think he's definitely the best one. He's definitely my favourite out of all of them to
it's
get
weird,
promotion.
Actually, though, in this process, I have actually taken another look at Perturabo, and I actually think he might be a fairer candidate for S status.
Yes, I think he's sort of more iconic in a way from maybe that's the age of the mini, but the pose and the detail is is just as good, if not better, than Khan. I think they're both really great, but for almost like very different reasons.
I think Khan is the best of the A's. I think he is the number one A by far, but I do think Perturabo is better. And I think as a result, I think he probably belongs in S. Because again, that base is stunning. The pose is really cool. The details are nice. Yeah, I genuinely think Perturabo is up there. Of all of these, which is weird because I'll be honest with you, prior to this, I've obviously always known what Perturabo looks like. I've just never really looked. And I actually, upon evaluation, I'm like, actually, this is pretty epic.
It's quite understated, so it's not like impressive from like its pose or like its scale and size, and it's quite a dark color scheme. But I think the scale of the model's really on point. The pose is really good. Yeah, it's got a really nice base to it as well, and it's sort of I think his armor is particularly cool, and it's very sort of different from a lot of the others. So it kind of makes him quite a unique model in that respect.
He's one of two. In fact, I think he's one of one in terms of a Primarch in a Terminator-esque plate.
Yeah, it's very interesting what he's in. So
yeah, because Mortarion is in regular power armor type vibe by the looks of it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Perturabo definitely leans more into the Terminator plate type look, which is cool. Any of the A's that we would see go down, I don't think so. I think we've had that debate. I think they all deserve to be there. B's, I don't think any of these B's deserve to go up. Do any of them deserve to go down?
I mean, Perturabo's not my favourite, but I mean...
Perturabo? He's number one. Or number
Ferris, 3. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, that's fair. I think...
Not unless they go down, but to the bottom of that list is fine.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything in C we want to see go up? You probably would say Lorgar, wouldn't you? Not Lorgar, sorry. Yeah, Lorgar.
Yeah, no, Lorgar's cool. I would happily promote him because I think he's probably better than Ferris personally.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I will concede you that one. I think that's
thank you.
Totally
Thank you very much. Yes.
Well, at the end of the day, mate, it's a collaborative effort, as we said, collaborative effort. Yeah, I'm happy with C. My only tweak with C is I would probably put Bobby G at the top of it.
Oh, okay.
I think Bobby G, bizarrely, because of the iconic nature of it, but also just the overall kind of quality of it as a sculpt and the significance of it as the first Loyalist Citadel Primarch. I think even though there are technical elements that all these other miniatures do in a more superior way, I think he's our number one C. I think he's the capital C.
Right. Okay. Fair. Okay.
Again, that's my only thing. I mean, we could tweak where. I mean, is Fulgrim better than Angry Ron? Maybe.
No, I don't think so.
No,
he's cool, but I think I really love like how dynamic Angron is. It's like it's quite a classic sculpt, I think.
And I think we're pretty aligned on the Ds. I don't think we are eager to upgrade any of these. But who is the worst? Is it Bobby G or is it Magnus? My vote is Bobby G.
Fair.
I think Bobby G is worse than Magnus.
Yeah, I can get behind that.
Yeah, there you go. And then last thing last, who is that? So at the moment we have Fulgrim and Horus at number 1 and number 2. Is that where we're landing?
Yeah. I think you can't argue elsewise. I was going to say if we were to put Abaddon from 40k in here as a guest spot. Where would you put him? Because he's quite an iconic sculpt, and really good pose.
I think based on this criteria, though, he'd probably sit somewhere in the B column.
Yeah, I'd almost want him to. I feel like he deserves an A, but I don't think he necessarily is. Although he's got things like
the character deserves A status. The miniature, he is not a better sculpt than Lionel Johnson. He is not a better sculpt than Mortarion. He is not a better sculpt than Khan or Magnus. As in this
I
Magnus.
think you're rating Mortarion too high, but that's my own bee in my bonnet.
Yeah. I think Mortarion is arguably one of the best Citadel miniatures. Period. Like he's up there.
No, what are you on? Really?
In terms of the Warhammer 40,000 range, like who's better than what? Well, according to this, Lionel Johnson, but and I agree with that statement. To be fair,
there you go. Yeah. I mean, what about your favourite? Marshal Helbrecht, would he not be better?
High Marshal Helbrecht.
Okay.
High Marshal Helbrecht is better than Mortarion.
Oh yeah, of course.
High Marshal Helbrecht is S, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
High Marshal Helbrecht is probably Citadel's best miniature.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
probably
maybe a video for another time.
Other than, as you well know, Phil, you always forget her name, but the banner lady.
God, yes.
The
old like Martha or whatever her name is. Yeah.
She is the best. Yeah, she's the best mini that GW do. But if you take her out of the running, she's like god tier. You take her out of the running, it's Helbrecht.
That's true. Yeah. I want to say her name's Agatha. But I can't remember.
I think it is Agatha as well.
Yeah.
I think it is Agatha. Although maybe we're getting confused. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think, a strong B contender then. I think he deserves. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he is better than
40k Angron?
40k Angron? Oh, no, I don't think he's better than 40k Angron.
Okay.
I think 40k Angron's a better sculpt than Abaddon. If that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, sort of. It's the thing. I think Angron, the 40k Angron, when I first saw it, I was almost like, I could get behind this as an army and buy him, because I think he's quite impressive, despite me having issues with the wings to an extent. Whereas, weirdly, I have bought Abaddon to convert him into a different character entirely, but not because I wanted him as in and of himself, but I was like, his armour, I can turn him into something.
Amazing. Well, there we go, everybody. That was us rating the Primarchs. Did we get it right? Do you agree with our assessment of these fine miniatures? Let us know. We'd love to hear about it. But for now, we're going to move on to whatever we decide to do next. Transitional noise. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the outro section of the podcast, which is obviously the bit before the very end of episode 199. Ooh, what a milestone. I think this is the perfect time to quit, don't you, Phil?
It could be. Well, one episode to go, then we quit, yes.
That's it. This is us riding off into the sunset.
Exactly. Taking all our Patreon money and eloping to New Mexico.
To be fair, I mean, New Mexico is probably somewhere where the relatively small amount of money we've amassed through Patreon over the years could maybe, last us 5 minutes. There or I don't know, Zimbabwe.
I think Thailand is the classic place to go where your money goes quite far. Maybe there.
That's fair. We can go Thailand. But probably a better shout than Zimbabwe, I imagine. But, there we go. Episode 199 in the bag. Well, didn't end up being the episode we thought it was going to be, did it?
No, but obviously we talked about that earlier. But, and I guess we won't be doing it next episode, because next episode is going to be our special 200th party episode. Party episode where, we're still not 100% decided what we'd be doing. But it'll probably involve a ramble. Probably involve maybe a Q&A with the dear listeners. Maybe
we'll afford ourselves an extra week of production time just to kind of ensure, although to be fair, I would say the regular release cadence is more important than the bells and whistles. Maybe I should have taken the proactive efforts to find, potential editors or people that could have assisted with some of the additional production lifts, but we'll be fine. We'll get it done. We'll get it down. It's the 200th episode, so we've got to put a little extra work in for it, which is no bad thing. I got away with not having to do the Christmas quiz last year.
You owe them, Dan. You owe them that blood, sweat, and tears.
Absolutely. So we'll put a little extra effort into it and give it a little bit of an extra set of bells and whistles. But no, so we were unable to secure the guard codexes that we ordered off of Element Games. Apparently Games Workshop just didn't give them enough stock. Even at the time of recording this, which is Monday the 3rd of March, we still don't have them. We're just going to wait till we do, and then we'll put that in the mixture for probably episode 201. We'll talk about the guard stuff. We know, obviously, that many of our listeners came to us through our early affinity and or association with the Death Korps of Krieg, and by extension the entire guard range. So we do know that we have a great many listeners who really appreciate, more specifically, your insights on the guard, Phil. So we will endeavour to meet your needs.
That would be nice. And if we don't, Dan, I did have an offer for someone to replace you, and they will happily wear your skin and talk Krieg with me forevermore, every episode.
I mean, if that's something you would like to do, you're quite welcome. I don't mean to hold you here against your will, Phil. If you've got a better offer out there, I would, through tearful eyes, congratulate you and pass you on to your new partner in crime. Whom was it, by the way? Who made you this generous offer? Would you dare, speak their name?
Yeah, well, I even sent you the screenshot. It's Trenches of Racks over on Instagram, which is clearly a Krieg person.
Quite clearly, on account of the words trenches and or racks, I suppose.
Exactly.
Or vracks. Is it vracks?
With a V.
Oh, it was with a V. It sounded more like you were saying racks. I was like, I'm sure it's fracks. Anyway, well, good for them. Let them enjoy the delights of doing so. I'm sure you'll do well.
Exactly. And then it gets you out of editing.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's an upside. I don't really mind editing. I don't really mind any of it massively. I think, as always, it's just one of those things. You just sort of get into the groove of it and deal with it. We talk about this from time to time, and apologies if we're talking about it again, but I think, the real kind of trials and tribulations of podcast creation really just comes down to consistency. Obviously, building an audience and creating a kind of consistent tone of voices is its own kind of challenge. And I don't know necessarily how well we've done at either of those things, but, we do have really great, consistent listeners, which is super lovely. And, we are able to consistently deliver content, which I think is always, played in our favour. But yeah, that's the hard bit of it, really. If any of you are out there thinking of getting into podcasting or any kind of content creation, it's not a job. I definitely don't think I would want to do it if it was, but it's not easy either. So yeah, I think it's always an interesting challenge. But no, I still love it, mate. I really enjoy it. As we're approaching 200 episodes and many years of producing this content, I think it's been a really rewarding and enjoyable thing that I'm really happy that I get to share with you, but also the listeners. So yeah, I know many really kind of core fans of Lookout Sir get quite, upset by the idea that one day we're going to hang it up and stop doing this. But, inevitably that is ultimately it. But it won't be now. Unless, of course, me and Phil meet with some unfortunate accident, which is always a possibility, isn't it?
Well, exactly. But then Trenches of Rax is ready to step in to replace either of us.
Either of us. I don't want him. It sounds awful. I'm not interested. Trenches of Rax, I don't want you.
It's replacing one Krieg fan with a probably more diehard Krieg fan, which is even worse.
I think at your worst, you were probably one of the most diehard Krieg fans you could have found.
Oh, but, completely. But I've mellowed.
You've mellowed over time. Yeah. My more kind of I don't know. My general vibe towards things has obviously weakened your resolve over the years.
I think it's just a matter of delving into other armies as well. Made me appreciate more than just that one army. I think there's something to be said as a hobbyist to just be a one army person, and then you can be really passionate about that one thing and just really focus on it. But then it just becomes this ever expanding army, which, I think some armies just can't physically do that. But Krieg, at its height, certainly could, because obviously it was being supplemented by all the Forge World stuff. I think even as a guard player, you could do it. Maybe less so now, but there's still enough of the range that you could do it. It would just be a bit more repetitive maybe than what it could have been years ago.
I suppose as well, though, without wanting to kind of trivialise it too much, in many respects as well, like any good relationship, you either, grow together, come together, or you grow apart, right? And in so many ways, what has kind of happened with Krieg over the last 10-ish years has probably been, a challenging experience for, Forge World aficionados such as yourself. In many respects, the Krieg isn't quite the same thing today as it was years ago. So in many respects,
that's true.
You haven't changed, Phil.
They have.
But the Krieg have changed.
It's interesting, and there's probably a slight bias to it. But I did a post a while ago on my Instagram where I was talking about I was doing like a hot take where I was like, I don't believe Forge World was as expensive as people thought it was in comparison to how expensive Games Workshop is now, was basically my take. And I compared prices with the modern Krieg plastic range with my 2019 catalogue Forge World range, because I had the catalogue, so I could compare prices. So I compared prices for like things like the new combat engineers with the old engineers, a couple of the artillery pieces like the Thud gun with the new kit, and like the infantry squads as well. And some, and like the Death Riders was the other notable one. And I also gave the current price of the plastic stuff, the old price in the catalogue, and then I did an inflation-adjusted price of that catalogue to give a closer approximity of what it should be valued at now. The only thing I couldn't do is I was trying to look on the old Wayback Machine for like last year's prices where some of the stuff still was on the Games Workshop website when it ported over. And unfortunately, the weird queue system that they implemented on the Games Workshop website has ruined the Wayback Machine. So every time you try checking out the Wayback Machine, it just has a hissy fit looking at the Games Workshop or Forge World website because of that queue mechanic. That seems to be the thing that throws up an error. So yeah, it just can't track it, I think. Whereas if you go back really far, I'm pretty sure there's, you can actually still view some of the Forge World pages. Anyway, the takeaway was things like the engineers were very comparable and only slightly more expensive than the modern Games Workshop counterparts. And same for some of the other infantry. So basically my point was we thought it was really expensive then, but it's only marginally more expensive than the current plastic kits. And personally, I'd rather pay that extra premium for what I consider still nicer models. The only times you make real savings was like the heavy weapon teams and the Death Riders, which you buy individually. So for heavy weapon teams, you need to buy 3 packs of them to make up a unit. And for the Death Riders, you need 5. So, that would cost you in excess of like 120 quid, I think, for like 5. Whereas now it costs you like 35 or 40 quid or whatever it might be. Is it also interesting that most of the kits nowadays seem to net out at £40? £40 seems to be their new average price for almost all box sets. There are some exceptions where it's higher and where it's lower, though. But what was interesting, so a bit of a ramble, the main takeaway, though, was so many people were like, oh, I just prefer the old sculpts, and they prefer the resin models. And I don't know if that's because there's an inherent bias in my audience, because I've always been a Krieg person. So the people I'm sort of showing off my posts to are going to be like older Krieg players, maybe, rather than newer people who would prefer the plastics.
I mean, it's a fair, evaluation and a fair critique, I suppose, as well, of your Instagram audience and the kind of people that are attracted to, following your particular brand of content there. So, yeah, I think, there will definitely be a bias that shines through, but ultimately it's still a valuable, exercise to engage in. And ultimately, yeah, I think you are unique in so much as you have a certain nostalgia and enthusiasm for that particular range of miniatures, and they are more significant to you than the newer plastics, which you have a much less of a relationship with. But it's fair to say that prices within the GW side of things, especially within 40k, are now drifting into a relative level of absurdity. The one again within Astra Militarum that created a lot of hubbub recently was the Hell's Lust.
Oh yes, yeah.
That was, I mean, to be honest with you, I was legitimately surprised by that.
Was it 40 or 45?
£47.50.
For I want to say 5 characters? Or five, a unit of 5 models, but each one is relatively individual. But it's...
Well, very individual. Yeah. And beautiful sculpts. Oh, yeah. Let's not be unfair to the kits. They're gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. They're really good.
You and I waxed lyrical about these when we were going through it. The Commissar especially, truly beautiful. The banner bearer, the standard bearer, very, very cool. Really, really nice. But yeah, I mean, $47.50, it's quite a lot.
In comparison, so that is obviously Games Workshop prices. From Element Games, you can buy the Horus Heresy, Mechanicum heavy support box set, which is the new tank, the new Walker model, plus I want to say another tank. You get like 3 big things in there, don't you? And that's like 90 odd pounds from Element. Obviously it's like 120 normally, but basically
110 for,
and then that character set of a unit of 5 infantry models is basically half the price of that massive box, which feels in comparison an absolute bargain for what you get. Because it's just insanely cheap for what you get in it, if you can get it from a third party, of course. It's a bit more expensive from Games Workshop, but I mean, anything over sort of 40, even 40 seems pricey for that unit. And it's the sort of thing where if it was like 25, 30, I would have been like slightly tempted to buy it because I thought it was a really gorgeous kit. But I think the thing that puts me off of it is, one, it's got no like real rules to actually play in a game. I guess it might have Legends rules, but but
each of the miniatures perfectly represents something on the tabletop, right? So it's
I guess that it's probably been priced in a way, assuming people are going to buy the box and split it. So you've got like a Commissar, you've got a Castellan, and you've got a Priest model, I guess, correct. And then you've got 2 random people that maybe don't really fit into anything, but it's like you bought 3 characters with some extra bodyguards. So, and it feels like that's how they priced it, because it just feels so expensive for what it is.
Well, it's the same price as what they charge today for Gaunt's Ghosts. So Gaunt's Ghosts
has that gone up in price as well?
Jeez. Presumably
it makes me worry for the, what was his name? Kado, is not Ezekiel, but something like that. The vampire guy that they previewed. Because he is a Black Library unit, much in the same way of like Callus and Toll, and Neve Black Talon. He's only 3 models though. So it's him, with a little ghost, on his base, which looks very cool. And then it's a vampire lady and, a human necromancer with a snake. And if that's 40 plus quid, I will be quite annoyed because I'd quite like to get that unit, I think.
I'd be surprised if it was for, because again, the AOS stuff seems slightly cheaper sometimes, but even if it is 40 quid, well, first of all, will they do rules for it that can be used in actual games?
I think they said he's in the book. Yes, yeah, because it was an army. Sorry, it's a regiment of renown, but it's a unit for Soulblight Gravelords. But anyone that's in the Death faction, like Nighthaunt that I've got, you can take it as a regiment of renown. So it's like, in comparison to, it's not Neve. What's the unit we've just been talking about? The 40k one. Hell's Last. So that obviously doesn't seem to have like full unit support and isn't in the codex. I mean, we don't have a codex, so we're not sure, right? Like that sort of just comes out and it's like, oh, if it's got rules, it's instantly Legends rules at best. Whereas with the AOS one, it's like, no, it's got full support. It's in the codex. Other armies can even take them via the regiments of renowned ability. It's like that feels like a much better way of supporting those kind of Black Library units and model ranges than the way they've sort of done it for 40k. Because it's like the Hell's Last one would make perfect sense if you wanted to take them if you took that regiment of renown concept and put it into 40k. It's like, oh cool, they could be attached to Sisters or Space Marines because Space Marines have come to a planet where these are the last survivors potentially. Like there's some sort of fun narrative mechanics you could do around mixing and matching those sorts of factions, but maybe that's going a bit more into that whole allies concept that they've sort of done away with nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, it's reasonable to assert that the Regiment of Renown system is, superior in terms of its ability to facilitate more diverse unit range within people's armies, but also within, the kind of mainstay game system of AOS. I think, personally, I am a big fan of Regiments of Renown. I find it really intriguing where I have the rare opportunity to kind of speak to people about AOS and kind of, share with them some of the more kind of compelling aspects of the game and why I find it fun. And one of the things that I often speak to people about is opening their eyes to the Regiment of Renown system and how it works in terms of, list construction. So talking to people about what they have in their armies presently and, discussing where they might want to go with it and, suggesting to them that actually you really should look at the Regiments of Renown because it probably will give you an interesting answer to a problem that you might be facing. I myself have definitely found that I've leaned into them more and more in terms of army list construction. My Skaven army at the moment, I have a 2,000 point Skaven list that features the Slaves to Darkness Regiment of Renown with the 5 cavalry lord on mount and 20 warriors, just because it gives me a number of answers to questions that I needed to solve,
like really durable cavalry units, basically.
Exactly. Well, this is the thing, right? Like, clan rats are very, very good at getting in the way, but they're not very good at staying there. Whereas, obviously, the Warriors of Chaos really give you that extra durability in that space and can trade relatively favourably. But also the knights hit really hard in a melee capacity, but really offer more of a kind of counter-offensive option that, you know, the Skaven just don't have. A lot of the time you can charge into my Skaven units with reckless abandon because ultimately I can't really do much in response. I don't have very much combat threat to kind of unincentivize you from heading towards me. Whereas if I was using Chaos Knights in a kind of defensive play, I think that would definitely make people reevaluate the efficiency of their options, because obviously countercharges are a thing, but even if countercharges aren't a thing, the very fact that I have the threat of a Chaos Knight charge response in my, you know, next turn definitely will, you know, make it more difficult for people to, you know, just freely charge into my rats and chop them up, basically. So, yeah, I find the Regiment of Renowned System really good, and I'm hopeful it's one of the things that they bring across into 40k when they get around to the next edition next year. But, you know, we'll wait and see, I suppose.
Yeah, it's definitely a good way of sort of, adding some sort of theme to armies without...
Yeah.
Because obviously we've always said it for a while, like, armies should have a particular play style which gives them strengths and weaknesses. And often we criticise it when they plug those weaknesses with just new models within that range. So they sort of lose their archetype. So it's like, Tau shouldn't have some monstrous close combat units, but they sort of now do in with like Kroot and even some of the, Tau battlesuit options. And it's like, but they shouldn't really. But if they had ally that they could plug in.
Well, they do in the case of Kroot.
Well, yes, but it's almost like saying Kroot is a standalone faction, but you can take a Kroot unit into Tau, makes more sense. And, a bit like saying, oh yeah, okay, I want a really durable kind of combat infantry unit for my guard. So I'm just going to be able to add in a unit of Custodes or add in a unit of Space Marines to give them some sort of punch that they wouldn't normally have, as opposed to creating a really durable sort of unit. Don't talk about Bullgryns. I mean, a different unit, obviously. And that's the thing, because if you start sort of just fleshing out, I mean, it's one of those things where people love it both ways, right? And they both have pros and cons. If you give someone everything, then that keeps them happy, but they sort of lose the sort of overall archetype of that army. But sort of focusing them down to something specific is limiting, but that's sort of the point of that faction, that it has a particular playstyle. So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I've always thought they should do a form of endless spells for 40k. And when I think AOS 2 came along, when they first did Endless Spells, I was convinced that's what we would see. I guess I thought it was going to be in either 8th or 9th edition. I can't remember which one was due just after Second Ed. I want to say maybe 8th edition. It just felt like something that seemed like a bit of a no-brainer.
It was the 9th edition.
Oh, maybe it was 9th.
After Second Ed.
Yeah, because I was like, but they used to do spells like in Dark Millennium. You had sort of a form of endless spells that stuck around on the table. Later on, you got those vortex grenade spheres that were like the template that were in 3D.
Yes, yeah. Those were they were vortex grenades, and then also there was a very slight different coloration of it that was used to represent webway portals for.
So
for the,
I think something like that would be really interesting, but I wouldn't want generic spells that everyone has access to and faction-specific ones. I think faction-specific ones is the way to do it for 40k if you were going to do that. And maybe Imperium is just one faction if you wanted to be really broad. And then you would have, Eldari and Drakari would be one, and then, everyone else gets their own. So you could have sort of these highly themed, interesting psychic powers. But then, they've done away with the psychic phase, so maybe it doesn't really work anymore as a concept for 40k. unless it just becomes, I don't know, a weapon profile or something.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I think, endless spells to me don't really make sense within the 40k format, at least not in the way that
I wouldn't necessarily say how they work currently, but a form of, psychic power that can manifest on the table with a model, I think would be quite visually fun. But yeah, just becoming a data sheet with like a weapons profile that you can attack. Probably not very interesting. I think how they did endless spells in the last edition of the game might be slightly better, where they're sort of they're less interactive, and they do just a specific thing, and that's kind of what they're there for.
Yeah, I mean, who knows really? I think the endless spell mechanics do have some interesting opportunities to be great. Even within AOS at the moment, I think endless spells are in a very weird spot. But 40k at the minute, I think, with the way the game is and the sort of terrain, but also just kind of model density of the game, I think adding in large pieces like that is quite counterproductive. I think the same is technically also true of the few factions that still have terrain features. I think those are intriguingly kind of counterproductive to the game as well, and understandable why many of them been got rid of. Obviously, the Elder have most recently lost the Webway portal. It's probably one of the losses from the Elder Codex, or the Eldari Codex, that was relatively underpublicized, but it is still quite a significant change to how the army works to remove that, because they've had that I think for about 6 years now. Removing that.
Long, surely.
I might be wrong about this, but I think they introduced it in 7th edition 40k.
No, it was after 8th. It was like 9th ed, I'm sure it came out. It was like really recent.
Well, maybe. No, what, the Webway portal?
Yeah. No way, it was 7th ed.
I think they introduced it. It might have been 8th edition, actually. You might be right. I think they introduced it in 8th edition Harlequins. It was one of the Harlequin books. Are you going to make me go get the Harlequin books?
100% is not 7th ed. It was new. It's new.
Phil, you talk to yourself for just 2 seconds.
I know. I can say mean things about Dan, everyone. Won't that be fun? Yeah. No, I think it was. I think mid-9th edition would be my guess. I don't think it was 8th edition. It certainly wasn't 7th edition. Unless my memory's woeful. Which, as we all know, it is. He's back.
Coming back. Hello, Phil. Did you miss me?
No. You're proving me wrong.
You were like, oh, what's his face of trenches or whatever it was. He wouldn't do this to me.
No, exactly. He wouldn't wander off mid. He would seamlessly pause it and come back as if nothing had happened.
No, it's more entertaining to walk away, I find. Okay, hang on. No, it's not in there. You're right, Phil. It wasn't in 7th edition.
But when was it, was the question.
Well, it's definitely 8th edition then if it wasn't 7th. I'm not going to go and get the 8th edition Harlequin Codex, but I do have it. I tell you what, actually, going back and looking at this 7th edition Harlequin Codex, my God, it's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Look at this. I mean, look at this beautiful. It's got loads of gorgeous artwork in it, like massive, like double-page spreads and full things, loads of iconography. Look at all that. Loads of different pattern designs and, insights on, like, the different shapes and things.
It apparently came out in 2018.
There you go. So, yeah, 8th edition. That's when it was, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
God, that's a really nice book, the 7th edition Harlequins book. I might spend some time with that. That looks really fun.
That's good.
God, God, 7th edition codexes are pretty. Maybe that's just nostalgia kicking in, though.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I think they all had a very, every edition has a consistent style, I guess. Some more sort of simple than others, I think. I think the layout is maybe not super optimized and things are sort of a bit more all over the place in the 7th ed ones. That's very gorgeous artwork, yeah.
That is gorgeous, isn't it? That double page spread of Harlequins having a big ruck with Slaanesh demons. God, that's dead pretty, that is. Well, there we go. That was very nice. That was a nice little distraction there. Thanks for that, Phil.
No worries. So terrain. Faction terrain seems... Yeah, it's a shame. I thought they were really going to commit to it as a thing that much like in AOS, every faction was getting, and it felt like for a time in 40k, they were doing it. And much like a lot of things that Games Workshop do, they just sort of get halfway through it and then just give up. And then it just dwindles. Whereas at least with the AOS, they've sort of been a lot more committed to it. And admittedly, it's not something they did off the bat in one edition where everyone got it, but it feels like this edition, at least, the ones that still haven't had faction terrain or faction endless spells are getting them based on what we've seen so far. So, and it's good that they're sort of sticking to it. And to be fair, you sort of need everyone to have it for fairness, because those two things just are free. They don't cost any points, which is, potentially, a point of contention for like balance or, buying into a faction, because if something costs nothing for you to include into your army, it's almost like a baseline purchase that you need for your army. Unless the rules were so terrible, it would be pointless to take. So if, it's like saying the Elder Webway was a free terrain piece. So therefore, if you didn't have it, you're kind of losing out on these cool mechanics. And that gives you an advantage over if you're playing against another army that didn't have that terrain piece. Whereas at least in 40k, it did include points and cost you. So there was at least a trade-off for taking it. It wasn't an auto-include, basically.
Well, yeah. I never really understood when we got into like 3rd edition that some armies had these things and they were free. It did always kind of befuddle me. But now that everyone's getting them, it makes more sense. But I have seen people on the interwebs, or at least I was seeing people on the internet when AOS 4 was launching, grumbling about the fact that, it's this tax, you've got to buy this stuff to play the game. It's an absolute tragedy. It's like, well, yeah, but it's not universally true. For example, if you were, going to play Auric War Clans and you went, I want to do Big War. Big War doesn't let you take the terrain features. I don't even think there's much of a reason for you to have the endless spells in Big War, because although you can take casters or wizards, they're probably not some of the more optimal options that you would take within the build. So you're probably all right. Do Big War, you don't need even. But, although then some armies of renown do let you take the faction terrain piece, which is always weird, but some don't, but they specifically state it. But anyway, blah, 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 blah. Did you want to talk about, Phil? Because I do. The Blood and Zeal kill team review.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You like a Codex Surf. You like more of the wibbly, weird sides of the Imperium.
Yeah, the Inquisition-esque.
How did it stack up for you, buddy?
I think overall, I quite liked it. I think some of they're not Astra Militarum. They just confess. But yeah, the priesthood, Adeptus, missionaries, I guess. Adeptus Ministorum, I think is their technical faction name that they'd be under. Yeah, some of them are really good. Like Confessor model, his look and loadout is very similar to the very old metal mini, which actually, when in the Hell's End, did you say they were called? the back library unit that we were just talking about.
Oh, sorry, yes. Yeah.
Because their priest, I think when we talked about them in the review episode, I said, she's very similar to the metal miniature in terms of the hat and the mace.
Yes.
And this guy has that as well. He's got the book as well, which I believe that one also had. Then there's the guy with the dual flamers, which is similar to a metal mini, but he had like flamers for arms. And they were much bigger and looked way better. It's interesting that they've got a cherub that actually has a weapon. And that's the first time, I think, ever we've seen cherubs that are, like, armed. Because normally they don't have anything. They're just sort of flying around carrying books and scrolls. This one's got a little goad stick by the looks of it. And then, some of the others look very similar to either old metal miniatures or because one of them actually is a copy of I can't remember his name. He's the priest from Inquisitor, so the 54mm scale game, which is the drill abbot. That model, is a sort of like for like copy. And then you pointed out that the Death Cult assassin doesn't look at all like a normal Death Cult assassin.
Yeah, which I didn't like, personally. I feel like, again, right, I suppose in one regard, you could argue that, it is a good thing for GW to diversify the representation of, pieces to extend beyond, certain archetypes. Death Cult assassins were definitely guilty of being very kind of overly sexualized by a number of their kind of fans. But to me, that was obviously one of the great kind of charms of them in a way. I kind of liked the idea that they were these kind of, hyper sort of almost sexualized representations of like death, and there being some kind of almost strange, kind of correlation between their appearance and their desire to, wreak havoc and sow death amongst, the enemies of the Imperium. I think it kind of worked. Again, giving us a male variant of it, I suppose, makes sense in the same regard as them giving us female variants of other things. But strangely, I just don't like the boxiness of the character. I mean, at the end of the day, had they given me, and you won't get this reference, Phil, unless you will, you might surprise me. Had they gone with kind of like a Voldor type look from the game Soul Calibur?
No, I didn't get that reference.
No, fine. Well, basically, Voldor, I've forgotten his actual, hang on. Voldor, Soul, Voldo, sorry, got that wrong. Voldo. Do you know him now?
No.
Do you know Voldo now?
No.
Okay. Anyway, Voldo is basically a big gimp of a man who has knives for hands.
Brilliant.
And he looks awfully similar to the Death Cult assassins. Yes, a male, but still very much of that aesthetic.
Right,
where,
yes, like full-on skin suit all over. This guy looks like a cross between a Assassin's Creed assassin and like what I imagine a tech priest, like Mechanicum assassin would be, because he's even got like the sort of cog detail on his hood, which is giving me sort of tech priest vibes. So, and he's very heavily armored with sort of like the shoulder plate armor. Yeah, whereas, John Blanche's original sketches are all, I guess, a bit sexualized to an extent, high heels and a bit, skin-tight bodysuits and things like that. And as you say, they could have just done a male version of that, but maybe they just want to steer away from that. But they could have done a female version and toned it down a bit, which is they've done plenty of other times when they've, when they've redone sort of that sort of era of miniatures. And, the sisters in general have had that sort of, slightly toned down take to them. So, Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Well, it's weird as well when you consider that within this range, the only female character, or at least the one that seems overtly female, is the one that's being pseudo crucified or whatever it is. The one with the the miraculous or whatever it's called. So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, if that's what they thought, my thing is with this is I get the feeling that the sculptors made an assassin and some bright spark in the rules writing team or whatever decided to call it a Death Korps assassin, but I just feel like this feels very far removed from what a Death Korps assassin should be. From an
completely agree. Like I like the mini, but as you say, it's an assassin. It's not a Death Korps assassin. It's like because that to me has a very particular look. And it's, it's much like how they did the sort of weird amalgamation of combat engineers and grenadiers, and they called them combat engineers. It's like, but you gave them skull masks. It's like, just call them something else because they're not engineers and they're not really grenadiers. Just give them a different name rather than reusing existing names, but designing it in a totally different way.
Yeah, and I get it, right? Like, Death Korps assassins are not a big part of the lore, right? Like, I mean, they're not a very, very prevalent part of the game. They've always been a little bit, on the outskirts of it. There have definitely been occasions within the competitive scene where the Death Korps assassins have had some play and they have felt like a compelling option. But majoritively, they've been pretty on the fringes. They've only really ever had 2 miniatures. So, they have been fairly unremarkable in terms of their, range and the support they've received. But, much in the way that, people quibble about, other, kind of gender swaps, etc. I feel like this is a negative in the reverse. And again, it just doesn't feel like a Death Korps assassin to me. Right?
Yeah, so it's weird. I've been also just looking at some of the models, and some of them feel like they are dual pose miniatures, and that you've got a base torso and got different heads and arms on them. And I don't think that's the case. In which case, it feels like maybe they've just digitally copied some of the body elements and then reposed them and then added elements to them. But like you've got 2 guys with the books on the backs as banners, and they've both got like flame weapons, but their overall sort of look feels just so similar. And then you've got a couple of the more priesty ones with the sort of the monk's robes, and those 2, even though they're in completely different poses, just look like they're wearing the same items of clothing. And there's not enough like uniqueness in each model for my liking. And that they just look a bit samey in places. And I don't know why that is. I can't put my finger on it, but I think it feels like there's been a bit of copying and pasting and tweaking going on. But maybe that's just me putting my tinfoil hat on.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think, look, overall, I would say that the Imperium side of this box has a lot of good qualities to it, and I think as well, when painted by people painting in a non-GW style, I think this will really come to life. I love the current Imperial Henchman kit. I think it's really cool, and I think this expands on it in a really good way. So obviously, for people who want to kind of do the Imperial Agents or create that kind of Codex Surf ideology, I think this is really cool, and I am in favour of it. I just don't like the Death Korps assassin. And I also don't really like the cherub either, but only because to me cherubs shouldn't be, offensive. I mean, the cherub is theoretically grotesque enough, I suppose.
The cherub also has hair, but also a goatee beard. Yes. Which it's a baby. It's not meant to be a tiny midget man. It's meant to be a dead baby, even though I think it's now no longer a dead baby. It's like vat grown or whatever, but it's like, it shouldn't have facial hair. That's just wrong.
Yeah. It's sort of weird in a way. It reminds me of Penn from Penn and Teller.
It does have that vibe, yeah.
Yeah.
It weirdly looks like Kenny Boucher, the American painter. It's got the same look facially.
Sorry, I got confused for a second there. I thought you were talking about Bobby Boucher, which is from an Adam Sandler movie. Sorry, yes. Yeah, different vibe. Anyway, yeah, they look all right. I'm not a fan of the Death Korps Assassin. The next part of it is the Khorne element of it, which is essentially a unit of super jackals.
Yeah, goremongers they're called here.
Yeah, but they're not actually world eaters, right? So they're like basically some other Khornate chaos kind of like faction.
Well, are they just generic Khorne, but not... Well, because, so the jackals and the world eater cultists don't specifically need to be aligned with world eaters, but they are aligned to the Khorne god.
Well, the jackals are specifically, it specifically specifies it in their lore section of the book that they are deployed with and fight alongside the world eaters, etc.
Is it? Well, I would say all jackals worship Khorne, but not all jackals work with world eaters.
No, evidently not. And again, in a way, expanding on that idea and showcasing this as a Khornate warband makes sense, right? In my opinion, jackals don't make any sense because I don't understand why world eaters would use resources to arm and train regular humans, regardless of how much bane juice they fill them up with or Khornate blood. But then the other part of it comes in where, this is one of those weird things, isn't it? Where it's like, this is where the insanity of Khorne meets, a bit of a conflict with reality because, Khorne ultimately is a god and, a belief set that deals a lot in raw anger and other hateful emotions. And they never really strike me as being the kind of group that would embrace or be able to utilize, technologies or sciences in a particularly useful way. It's
very Dark Mechanicum vibe almost with the levels of augmentation that they're getting.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a great line within this description which I loved, which is while retaining a modicum of cunning and level-headedness. So basically, while maintaining a modicum of cunning and level-headedness, the first thing they do is cut their own legs off, and it's like, oh, sure, okay, great. It's the weird thing of like, again, don't get me wrong. The models are cool, I get it, and it's 40k, who cares? It's weird stuff. But it is odd to me that a Khorne warband is going, I know what we'll do, chop our legs off and put on these advanced prosthetics that will essentially turn us into these triple-jointed sort of agile super warriors to better emulate the form of Khornate demons, because that's what they're going for.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Legs.
Yeah, they're like bloodletter feet, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's just the weirdness of it just seems, again, I just don't think these are the guys that are going to be maintaining that kind of gear. You know what I mean? It just feels very odd. And again, I get it. 40k, it's nonsense. Fine. But there's something.
I was going to say, you just got to imagine these guys on the World Eater ship in the canteen queuing up to get their food for their lunch.
Yeah,
that's the sort of weirdness of that's the sort of thing you can go, what would these guys do when they're not, trying to kill people? Do they have food? Do they eat? Do they have downtime? Or are they just raging maniacs fighting all the time?
Well, maybe that is all it is to it, right? And that, again, is fine. Like, again, I'm not opposed to the notion of Khorne cultists, and I'm not opposed to the idea that said Khorne cultists would use augmentation to improve their propensity for violence. Like, I get all of that, but it's that thing where it's like, in the first instance, you presented them as basically part of the World Eaters, which I struggled with because of the idea that World Eaters would use resources to arm and support these guys. Jackals are given chain axes, for God's sakes. The very idea that World Eaters would be handing out chain axes to humans is just madness.
I can sort of understand why they'd be armed, but they're not. They're being armed above and beyond what cannon fodder would be given, and you feel like that's how they would be used, and they're not even like militia that were in the army that would have access to those kind of things. Chaos cultists shouldn't really have much beyond what you'd see on like a Necromunda, Hive World, like auto guns and pistols and, maybe a chainsword, sure, but these are all much more like bespoke chaosy weapons. But then, weirdly you get that down in the Hive if you look at like the Corpse Grinder cult or even the Goliath gang. They've all got these meaty, mad chainsaw type weapons.
That's in the new world of Warhammer and Necromunda where they've gone. I mean, Necromunda's just gone ridiculous. The idea that
the tech levels,
there are gangs. It's gone stupid. Like, the thing is this is the thing. It's like, this, I suppose, is what happens when you have a studio-led mentality around manufacturing and around developing cool things, and in a way, I suppose it seems like a weird hill to die on. And I'm not saying I don't think there are cool aspects of these miniatures, but I think it's one of those things that just chips away at the authenticity of the world. And I felt like in years before, they did a much better job of grounding a lot of this stuff and making it feel of, the universe and of the setting. Whereas now it just seems like we get these miniatures and sure, why not? Why wouldn't there be Khorne worshipping cultists who seemingly are able to, while involving themselves in very, very kind of gruesome rituals of blood transference and and all sorts of other stuff, then chop their legs off and replace them with these really sophisticated prosthetics. Sure, fine, if that's what they're saying. But as I say, it's just one of those things where it's like, it's a weird detail that kind of erodes some of the logics, and essentially you're being asked to take more kind of leaps of faith in terms of the fluff and the rules that sort of dictate the way the world works. And at the end of the day, fine. But for me, I just think the Jackals have never really worked for me, and this more elite version of them makes even less sense, even within the context that they're not worldies.
Yeah, I sort of get where you come from. I think, the top half looks really good. The legs, while inspired by the bloodletters, right? Just look odd. Yeah. Just gives me Darth Maul Clone Wars vibes when he came back, and it's like, no, he should have just stayed dead because he looks weird and is a bit silly now with these mechanical legs. And these guys do that too. And to me, it's like part of the augmentation of people in Chaos was always from the Chaos gods. And it was always being given a blessing that would give you a claw hand, or, maybe they would have actually had like hooved legs because they've sort of got a blessing that's made them look more like beastmen. Like, that weirdly feels more in-world canon than what we have here. However, if these guys were accompanied by Dark Mechanica Magos, I would be like, okay, cool, now I understand the logical leap of why they're being augmented, as opposed to just being generic cultists that sort of have this access to weird tech, but it's not really being shown or talked about. Maybe, there is a proper decent in-world lore reason for it, but it's not given here. And often we're viewing it from a model-led way, where it's like the model should be telling the story of how and why they're doing these things. And you're not really getting that from these models.
Yeah. To be clear, I think the models are cool. Like, I think they're cool. I've got nothing bad to say about them as miniatures. I just don't understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And yeah, like you say, Phil, genuinely, if you look at like old timey-wimey Mordheim and you look at, say, the Carnival of Chaos as a kind of point of comparison, i.e. a human warband that is heavily augmented by the influence of chaos. The Carnival of Chaos is one of those ones where it incorporates demonic elements. It adds in that kind of augmentation through, mutating of the body to make that make sense in a way. And again, this is just a vibe thing. I imagine that, the god of Khorne probably looks upon these cultists essentially taking Khorne blood and trying to replicate the physical attributes of bloodletters, almost in a kind of insult. The very idea that these humans, these puny creatures, could aspire to or replicate the kind of, ferocious perfection of, of the bloodletters. It's just that thing where it almost seems, again, it's odd that, in a way, it's odd that it's even tolerated by Khorne. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like an odd way to take it. Almost like these guys are kind of perverting the whole kind of purity of it. Because Khorne is a much less... Khorne is a very straightforward god within the pantheon of Chaos gods. Tzeentch and Slaanesh and even Nurgle are very nuanced. Khorne cares not from which the blood flows. It's very much a kind of warrior, kind of pure sort of set of ethics that somewhat makes sense, even though it's absolutely brutal in its execution. So that's where I get weird with this.
You could argue this makes them more efficient killers, which is why they're doing it, and that it does make sense from that sort of just base premise, but it feels like there's too many sort of hoops that you're jumping through to make it work. Yeah,
and again, I think ultimately, again, miniatures are cool, I suppose, but yeah, for me, it just feels very odd. And again, it's sort of what it reeks of, unfortunately, to me, is kind of like, we have this unit. What else can we do with that kind of concept? How do we expand it? Oh, we're going to, give them robot legs. Why not? It just, I don't know. It's an odd concept. Miniatures are cool. Concepts are odd. I don't really know how they landed on it, but
I would have probably rather they given them like chainsawed arms, right? Where they're just like augmented the weapons to their limbs. That would be much more kind of grimdark than just giving them weirder legs. Yeah. But, it is what it is, I suppose. But yeah, to your point, I think if they could have incorporated maybe a Dark Mechanicus element, that might have, elevated it somewhat, I suppose. Or, I don't know. It's a weird vibe. But on the plus side, on the topic of terrain that we were talking about earlier, it is an opportunity for you to get hold of the statue for the Adeptus Sororitas, which is cool. That is very cool. Yeah, just for statue, not the building that it also originally came with, which had some quite unique pieces. But the statue is really great, and it's probably worth trying to pick that up alone. I do like the missionaries, or at least some of them, and some maybe have more kit bash potential than just building straight out. But yeah, they've got elements to them.
Yeah, the missionaries, as I say, I'm not a big fan of the Death Korps Assassin or the Cherub for that matter, but otherwise I think they're okay. As I say, I like the Khorne models, except for the fact that I don't understand why they exist, but whatever, that is what it is. On the whole, I think it's, I don't know, I think it's probably more of a hit than a miss, because most people won't care about, the weirdness that I'm talking about with the corn. I'm sure a lot of people will probably be listening to me saying this and being like, for God's sake, Stan, why are you never happy with this stuff? And, I wish I had the answers, but, as a box set, I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know. I might pick it up and then flog basically the corn stuff. Because I think there's probably going to be a bunch of people eager to get their hands on that. But yeah, here's what it is. Here's what it is. That'll probably do, mate. I mean, we've been talking for over an hour now. Admittedly, I walked away for at least 30 seconds, so that's, padded it out somewhat. But, unless there was any particular topic that you were desperate to address today.
No burning desires, no.
Fine. Well, look, I mean, episode 200 is around the corner. We hope that, you are able to join us and enjoy that when it comes around. But, between now and then, farewell.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.